All right. Hello out there, everybody. We're back again today, another Sunday for a couple hours to talk about game development, Unity, and everything else that's fun to talk about. So, welcome, Jason and Andrew. We might have a couple more people coming in to join us in a little while, but got these two guys here, and we're just going to go over a bunch of different game dev related topics. But we wanted to start by just opening up for any questions in chat. If anybody's got anything that they are curious about, want to talk about, or want to hear about, just drop it in chat now so that we can start building up a list and be ready for it as soon as we get to that point. So if you got anything, just say hello or just ask a question or any topics that you're curious about or just want to hear about. Let us know there. Anyway, welcome guys, and thanks for coming out again.
Thanks. This is great.
Yeah. It's always good. It's a nice distraction from work to be able to talk about game stuff for a while.
It is. It's a big thing for me, just being able to talk to other developers and other people who are working in the game industry and get kind of feedback from other people in chat too. Actually, I wasn't sure where I wanted to start today, but that actually reminded me of something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and I think might be a good place to kick it off, which was about just getting projects done and completing things and having some accountability and a group to report to. So one of the things that I forget what spurred it. Actually, no, I remember. I saw an email earlier this week from a friend who had he set up a system for people to do basically like mastermind groups for a certain segment of stuff. And I was thinking, I really like the fact that I've got some groups that I go to where I meet with other developers. I've got one for like business related stuff, one for game dev stuff, and I think that it's important to have like some group of people that you're just like constantly reporting to, talking to, sharing ideas with, and getting back and forth with. And we've talked a little bit about this in like the bigger context of like weekly meetups and going to those types of things. But even at the smaller scale, I think that it's really good for everybody to find or develop themselves a small peer group of other people that are interested in the same stuff that they can share things with, like this, like sharing our hobbies of talking about game dev stuff, right? Or their games that they're working on, or just the current progress of the things that they're on, where they're all kind of at the same level and pushing each other and working together. Not working together necessarily on the same project, but working together to kind of help and motivate each other and keeping that regular. So I know it's big and blabby, but I mean, essentially my recommendation for everybody, like if you're not already doing something like this, I would say go find or build yourself some sort of a small group, 4 to 5 people. That say start with 2, go up to 3, find a 4th, find a 5th, and slowly build up and just meet up regularly. Like meet up maybe once a week for half an hour or an hour. Definitely not in person. Just do it online because it'll be way easier and you're way less likely to flake out and not make it because going places in person is a pain in the ass, and it's hard to just add people to. Do something online where you're just meeting up once a week for a half hour and start reporting on what you guys are doing, where things are going, and where the progress is. And it's by far the biggest thing for me. I don't know. I'm going to shut up now and see what you guys think on this whole subject, though, of just having some groups and some accountability or just other people to report to that you're choosing to do it with,
Well, you convinced me by the sheer nature of the fact that I predominantly met Andrew here through one you set up. So I've been attending that one ever since for like been a year and a bit more, probably at this stage now. So I'm a big fan. I think it can feel a little bit, especially in my location, right? Because we talk about the fact that I'm in Ireland in the middle of nowhere. It can feel a bit isolating that you're even if you've got people who are programmers. I know a lot of other programmers, but I know a lot of other programmers who are in the business sphere. I don't have many Unity people I know. And so a lot of especially not game dev stuff. So there's very few people I can talk to about the kinds of topics that are interesting to me at the moment. And so having a group once a week I can talk to where people are literally making different kinds of games. There's somebody making a 2D game. There's somebody making a 3D game. There's somebody using ECS. There's somebody using, the different, like their own custom AI sprite stuff. It's really fascinating because you get to see different people's solutions to problems. And also, to be honest, sometimes when you're working on your own problems during the week for work, it can get a bit mentally draining. So having someone else's problem that's completely unrelated to yours can be a breath of fresh air to go, okay, cool. They've been banging their head against this for the last 2 weeks. I haven't. So to me, it's just a fresh problem. I can go, why don't you try this? And they're like, I hadn't thought of that. I said, that's what happens when you know, someone else gets to look at it from a distance. And so it's quite nice being able to help people make progress on their projects, and it doesn't cost you anything. It's just like a thing you can sit there and just, you know, have a nice coffee and just help out. And yeah, it's very edifying experience, I'd say.
I fully agree. I think you know, speaking of that meetup that Jason Weimann you set up, there's a lot of people who come and just sit and listen, and once in a while they participate. I'm a little bit of one of those people. I'll participate, but oftentimes I'm listening to the conversation. I find it entertaining. On my other computer, I'm working on my own projects, and it's fun. I think it does keep me. It's a type of motivation that you don't get from other sources. I think, you know, like there's the day job that motivates me to keep working on my hobby project that might replace the day job one day. There's family stuff. There's friends who are like, hey, how's your game going? There's all these different motivators, but having a core group of people that know what you're working on, and, you know, when you log on, say, hey, how was that thing you were talking about? Did you solve that problem? And you can report back. That's really motivational. And I think, you know, in general, for being online, it is much easier. Because you just, you know, if you want, you can have a drink. If you want, you can have a coffee. If you want, you can just have some water. Whatever you're in the mood for, everyone's ready to go, and you're set. Versus, you know, nothing against in-person things. I think there's tremendous value in in-person meetups as well if you've got one to attend. But those are a little bit more difficult to get to. You gotta get there. You know, they're more structured often. In-person meetups are, for a lot of us, more. It's a different experience, right? People get really nervous talking to others, talking to new people. Somebody in the questions asked about imposter syndrome, and I think that is something everyone faces. Doesn't matter who you are, it faces, you know. And I think that's a challenge. But, you know, those are important too. In general, anything we can do to meet up is probably a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think I like the in-person ones just because you get to go meet random people that you would never meet. You know, like I've come across people like never would have thought I would meet, and they just happen to be at this meetup, and stumble into them and make new friends. But I'm gonna pull in Saleem now and
Cool.
say hello. What's going on, man?
Hello.
Hey,
Hey,
good
Saleem.
to have you back, man.
What's going on? Are we live right now?
We are live,
Oh, thanks.
just blabbing
Thanks.
about.
Thanks for that.
We're talking about
No
meetups
warning this
and,
time.
and groups and stuff. Yeah, put your pants on real quick, Saleem. I'm just kidding. You don't need pants.
That's the other camera.
Pants-free podcast. Anyway, oh, glad to have you back, man.
It's good to be back. Sorry, I've been dealing with move stuff here and there, work stuff. So
All good. How's Texas?
Texas was pretty fun. I got to hang out with my little nieces and my buddy, getting prepared for the move. So, you know, I'm excited to get out there.
Sweet. Be cool then. Go set up a big giant studio in Texas, Saleem.
Let's
You can
do
start
it.
recording every day.
Oh, I thought you meant a game studio. Nah.
No, you do that too. You do them both in the same spot. You
We
just
can
got to
just-
record while making the games.
We can just start development and then just have it always on camera.
Just live 24/7.
We used to joke about that. I said all the time. It's such a soap opera that we would have made money on the side doing that.
Well, there's
Yeah.
studios that come close. I mean, you've got the no-clip documentaries for the Supergiant. Literally all of their games now. It's great. It's like watching a little mini TV show exclusively about their development process. And then you've got Double Fine, who basically, like, I feel like I know everyone at that studio just for about 6 years watching them go through different game jams and stuff. So, I mean, yeah, I'm a fan of that stuff.
Yeah. Seeing how a sausage is made can definitely change your mind about whether you want to get in the industry or not.
And it's really good too, because when you get the marketing ones, you get these really nice, everyone smiling at the camera saying, we want to innovate and create but when you watch the Double Fine ones, you just watch people just stressed out at their desk going, I can't right now. I've just been staring at it's like, that's relatable right there. That's great.
Well, so we didn't have any really set topics today. We've just been talking about so far meetups and user groups and just kind of the benefit of having some accountability and like having a group to actually report to every week and making that so that. But I guess one of my key points of it was just that when you have that, it kind of encourages you and motivates you to get stuff done and to kind of progress. I know a lot of people who like want to do game dev stuff on the side and they'll really struggle for a really, really long time to actually make progress on it because just get distracted, other things pop up and stuff. But the second everybody that I know that's joined a group where they have like some sort of a weekly reporting where they're going back and just talking to people, they all, at least from the ones I've seen, they all seem to be really successful with it, and it seems to really just push them forward and make it so that they're, I think, feeling accountable, like they need to get it done so that they don't show up and have nothing, right? Show up like I didn't get
it. In my
anything
case,
done.
like I'm not even making a game or doing any particular project because, well, quite frankly, I do enough work for other people. I don't need to do my own project. But sometimes going to the meetings, I like to play with ideas, and I usually do it for myself. I probably throw away a prototype or two a week just of silly things that I'm kind of practicing ideas. But now that I have a weekly thing to go to, sometimes I'll just like add an extra day and I'll package it a bit just to have something to show on the Wednesday, you know? So even if you're not doing it for the full project thing, I find it makes me more productive on my own side projects just for the sake of having something fun to show, you know?
Yeah. I want to go ahead, Saleem.
They keep those skills up. It's something to focus on and practice. Yeah, it's cool.
I wanted to hit a couple of these questions because we asked for them a little while ago and a bunch popped up, and there are a couple that I just want to hit. This one I think is perfect for Saleem. I'm starting our Kickstarter campaign. Any suggestion for me? Me and Saleem have done the Kickstarter campaign before, so I know that it's a lot of work and kind of a nightmare. I don't know. You got any suggestions?
The thing that comes to my head first is like understand the value of what you're asking for. You're not asking people to just pay all the bills. You're asking for them to basically kickstart something. And you don't have a plan post Kickstarter to keep funding. You look at some things. It started small. I was checking out it's a Frosthaven board game, the sequel to Gloomhaven board game, and it's like the most successful kickstarted board game ever by leaps and bounds since Kickstarter started. And it's pretty kooky because those guys started out with just a simple idea. They weren't asking for a boatload of money, and it just turned into something huge, because their idea was solid. And the way that they marketed and they presented the product, and how they showed their passion for the product, it turned into something much larger. But even if they had just gotten their baseline, that should have been enough, assuming that they were estimating their value right, that they could have gotten started and then built after Kickstarter. They could have built from there and been able to still fulfill their desires. So that's the biggest thing. Jason references us getting into Kickstarter, and that was one of the things I think really hurt us. Was we ended up at half of what we were asking for, I think, which I thought was insane, because we had some gigantic donors, and if we had just been smart about it, just a ragtag bunch of people who just had an idea for something, I think we probably wouldn't have been able to move on from there and maybe fund in different ways afterwards. But I just understand the value of your product, understand what you're selling people. Don't try to be an end-all be-all for some, have a focused, understandable, relatable idea for those you're targeting, and seriously, just this is the money that I need to get started. Have some good, I think we spent, a good couple days trying to get our pledges right and all our levels and stuff. It's a lot of work. But understanding your value is hugely important if you want to, be successful.
Yeah, I think most Kickstarters, they end up spending a month or two at least in advance just getting everything set up and run. And it may be even more than that now. I mean, Kickstarter's been around for so long. Who knows what the average and the timelines and processes, but it's a lot of work from what I remember, and I can't imagine that it's gotten to be any less work. And then you gotta, once you have it out there, you need to promote the Kickstarter as well. I constantly see ads for Kickstarters on things like Facebook all the time, just spammed there of things that I might be interested in, and it works. Right? Like I think it's probably there for a reason, but I don't know that that's something you want to jump into with no experience.
Well, this is one thing that I have many friends over the years who've made Kickstarter campaigns, because when you're in the early VR space, that was like what everyone did. So there's like 20 games or so that I watched the process of them going through the Kickstarter campaign, literally showing us the early versions, creating the tiers, doing. I have tons of stuff to talk about on this. This is a great topic. So the first one is, keep in mind, you don't get all of the money that you write down for your tier.
Yeah.
Like 30% gets taken by Kickstarter, right? That's just gone. That's just what they do. So the idea is, the money you ask for, you have to be aware of how much of it is not really going into your hands. Once you've gotten rid of fees and taxes and all that stuff, it's a lot less than you think. And what you're looking for with the amount you're asking for is how much it would cost for you to not have to worry about bills while you develop. That's basically all you're trying to get resolved. And in truth, what a lot of people will do is they'll use the Kickstarter as a way of judging interest to get a conversation with a publisher to buy them out, or to buy the work with their project. Because oftentimes the amount you get from Kickstarter won't be enough. It really depends what you're going for, but just keep an eye on the fact that you'll often hear about games that have been kickstarted, and then the audience will argue and say, hey, we kickstarted it, why do you have a publisher for your game? So, well, the truth is that basically has one person, maybe two salary for maybe 6 to 8 months. And if a game's going to take 2-3 years to develop, you may think you've funded their game. All you've done is funded the fact that they actually can spend their energy on the game and not on their day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. So it's usually a lot less. And in fact, it can go the other way. If a game earns too much money, they have to promise too much goals to the point where the scope creep ends up killing them even more so than they would have before. So be very careful of that. Another thing people don't think about is, when you do a Kickstarter, one of the surprise side effects is you've cannibalized your Steam wish list. Because what's happened is, a lot of people will buy your game on Kickstarter, and they're just keys you're going to be giving out once the Kickstarter is over. And so a lot of that drumming up marketing and kickstarting that you would have gotten from actually putting your game out there won't be represented by wish lists for people who haven't bought your game, right? Because you've basically got your hardcore fans have pre-bought it effectively on Kickstarter. It's not a big deal, but it's worth noting that that's something that will affect your numbers once you get to something like Steam. But in contrast, the good thing is, the biggest thing you can get is your emails. People don't really tell you this, but when you're working on game stuff in general, the most valuable currency you have is email addresses. This is basically for most marketing stuff, but for games especially, because people will forget. Most people, for them, it's a passing thought. They see a cool game, they'll thumbs up, and they'll go, oh, cool, I'll keep an eye on that. And then they'll forget. It's your life for the next 3 years. For them, it's a passing cool idea that they'll forget about. But if you remind them, they'll probably still buy it. So you need to have access to your audience, and Kickstarter gives you that. So make a point of doing some research into how much engagement to do with your updates. You want enough that people don't think they're scammed or that you've run away, but you also don't want too much that they turn them off. So try to walk that fine line where you only give an update whenever something valuable has happened. And probably the last one, which is just really valuable advice, is you may be tempted to do physical tiers. You may be tempted to do t-shirts or hats or something cool with your own brand or your logo or whatever on it. If you're new to Kickstarter, do not do it, because the amount of additional costs that you won't consider in terms of resolving shipping costs for different countries and how much the cost of production is. And if you haven't looked into how much it takes to make merch, you often have to buy in bulk long before. And so you're buying more than the amount that you're actually, and long story short, people have cannibalized the money they thought they'd earned for their game through Kickstarter by having to just pay to solve the physical tiers for the things they provided. But what you can do instead is offer virtual tiers. Like, to you, you may think it might be a different thing, but think about it. For yourself, is it not cooler to get your name in a game you like than it is to get a shirt or something? Like, I'm not saying the shirt's bad, but like, it's amazing how content that doesn't cost you anything to produce can actually be as valuable, if not more valuable, to a consumer. So lean into things like early accesses and alphas and prototype builds, or giving them names or sponsorships things in the game or whatever, or have them name a faction or something. These are big things that people really enjoy getting that don't cost you anything to produce, and it's worth really thinking about that.
So would you suggest a $30,000 tier where someone would be able to come into the studio for 6 months and help you design a system all on their own, having never done any game development before.
That sounds like a great tier, Saleem. I love it.
Yeah.
Limited to 10.
Yeah, if someone wants to pay me
Keep it more
$30K to
room.
hang out with me, I'd take 30,000 to hang out with me for a little while.
Man. That was definitely
My-
one of our tiers or something like it, and we were like, and if this happens, someone's just gonna have a headache, because that's not simple. That is a rough task right there, and they paid a bunch of money to do that. So, like, how do you handle that if they don't like what you're doing? Really scary. It's just funny when you think about the virtual side and putting someone's name. Like, we had a bunch of stuff like, hey, personalize a weapon or whatever, which makes sense. It's easy for us to do that. But then we had the crazy idea of, hey, we'll let someone come in for like 6 months and just, okay, all right, that's cool. Yeah.
So you don't drink when you're making pledge tiers.
Yeah, I think at best you'd stick with the once a month call for like the super high paying patrons, where you have a Skype call with them and discuss game ideas and get their feedback. That's the closest I would do. I don't want people in the office. That's too much.
You get to stay in the guest room.
Sleep on our couch.
Use the pool up until 5. Picture him out there. Anyway, Andrew, you sent me a link to a Kickstarter. I wanted to share it real quick. And
This is Bulletville. One of the guy who does most of my characters right now and a lot of the environment stuff as well. The modeling of that did a lot of these models for this game, Bulletville, and they're doing a Kickstarter right now. And this is one of those situations. They didn't blow past their goal. They've got their goal's 100K. They're 18K away. They have 7 days to go. So it's really for them becoming a nail biter now, because as many of you know, if you don't get the full amount on Kickstarter, you don't get anything. So that's it. It's either all or nothing. And so they're at this point where you know, every day they're just wondering, are we going to make it? And they're doing everything they can to get over that finish line. I think Kickstarter is 28 days. Is that right?
Yeah.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
I just dropped the link in chat for anybody who wants to go check it out while we're talking about it and back it.
Yeah. So it sounds like they're going to make it with 7 days left and less than 25% of the way to go. Plus, I'm guessing I've never done a Kickstarter myself, but I'm guessing the last few days you might see a bump.
Yeah, there's a website where you can check Kickstarter trajectories, and it'll estimate for you how far along you're going. And usually around this time, there's a last minute push for people for marketing. Anybody who's a big fan who wants to see it made usually pushes their friends into it near the end, so it tends to get a bit of a bump.
Yeah, that makes sense, because in the end, I guess if you put $50 or whatever into a project and you're like, hey, I know I'll get my money back if it doesn't get funded, but I want to see it funded. So hey, everybody, put your money in there too. That makes sense. So yeah,
I will say too, just as a fun side note, because we're talking about tips for Kickstarter, the fact that Jason's scrolling around this proves one of them I forgot to mention. Right, what's the very first thing he did? Is he played the video, watched about 8 seconds, and then started jump cutting throughout the middle of the video. That is going to be a lot of people's experience for the first thing they see. So what people make the mistake of doing is they start doing this overly produced marketing video of them going, hi, this is our studio. Welcome to the... Nobody cares. They want to know if they like you as a person, because the whole point of doing a Kickstarter is the personal campaign. So the best thing you can do is be memorable. Like, I've never even seen this campaign before, but I saw a guy holding up a character and like dancing it to the screen, and it's like, that's a dude. That's a guy that's going to be a fun person. And immediately that's more interesting to me than pretty much everything else. So it's one of those things that if you are doing a Kickstarter video, you're marketing yourself based on this. So make the first 10 seconds funny or interesting. Make it about you, not about your game. And then as you hook them on who you are, they'll care, or whether or not they want to see whether what you're making is any good. If you start with marketing spiel, they won't, you're talking to the wrong audience. That's not what Kickstarter is for. Kickstarter is for people supporting other people. So they want to like you. So make sure your Kickstarter is about you more so than your game. As weird as that sounds, at least the video, like the rest of it, obviously sell your game, but open that video should be about why you're making it and why it's important to you and why you might need a Kickstarter. Yeah.
It's if you look at the successful ones, you'll notice these trends where they all have very similar styles of content, where, really nice graphics, showing you what you get, all these levels. And it's just, they clearly put work into it. It's not the type of Kickstarter which you see from time to time where somebody just put up their little gameplay video and say, hey, I'm making a game. I want to make it. This is what I want to do. Fund me.
If you guys want to see early Jason videos, you should. Jason, can you do that Kickstarter video? Because I think we basically violated every single rule that Jason has put forth.
Oh yeah. I know it's terrible. It's like 2 lines each. Like, go read this. Like,
I will say,
like a bunch of people that didn't want to read anything on camera, reading something on camera, all nervous and stressed out. Yeah.
If someone's starting a Kickstarter and they know anyone with any kind of marketing experience or anything like that, like hit them up, because they can probably give you some really valuable information about how to talk to the audience.
And there's Nitro Day stuff that can make it like make or break your video. Like, people don't realize this, but there's so much hidden information through how you present yourself. Like, a good example here is and it may sound like a small thing, but every one of us here has a background that is an office. It is a place where we are, where we live and work, and that tells something about who you are as a person. I know it sounds weird, but what your instinct will be if you're new to making videos is you want to just like stand there in front of like your wall with a white wall and go, hi, this is me. And the thing is, that is not comfortable to look at. It's just because it almost feels like you're staring someone down, like unlimited eye contact, and it's an uncomfortable experience. So if you're doing a video where you're trying to address people, you actually want them to see you relaxed in your home or in your office. So you'll notice a lot of the good Kickstarter videos are somebody just sitting there going, oh, hey, this is my office. Oftentimes the camera will be here and they'll present with the monitors in the background, so they can actually put game marketing on the wall behind you so they can talk about it and then like point at the game stuff while they're doing it. So there's a lot of this stuff that realistically, do a bit of research first. If you know marketing people, talk to them. Like, honestly, it'll take you a week of doing a bit of homework and you'll find some really nice tips that'll make it like massively can increase the amount of money you can get. Yeah.
And just look at their Kickstarters. Look at what famous ones have done. See if you can find some timeline or history of where they started. You'll definitely get some ideas from that stuff. And make sure that you
have. For the love of God, don't put that business music. Just whatever you do, don't put that like tinkling business nonsense. Like that everyone knows the one, the royalty-free music where everything sounds like we're a business, and in business we business. They're horrible. Don't do that. Just make it authentically you and not some horrible marketing nonsense.
And don't use the word synergy a lot, because that's just not good. Unless you're making a game called Synergy or something like that, then.
Even then, maybe avoid it.
Yeah, and if you do make it, come back and share it so we can take a look at it on the stream.
Yeah.
We'll go through the Kickstarter and we'll let Jason tear it apart.
Well, what was it? Bulletvine, you said? I want to check that out. Looked pretty cool.
The Bulletville one, yeah. I linked it in the chat for everybody who wants to go check that one out too and go back it or see if they're interested in it. It'll look pretty cool.
Everyone go back it now.
There was another question here about learning to program in Java and wondering how practical that is for game dev today. But it's at a college level. So there's a college course or just, I guess, a college program teaching just Java. I guess they're only teaching Java and wanting to know like how much that applies. And I could give just a real like high level, I guess, statement on it'll apply a little bit because programming is programming, and learning to write Java isn't too different from learning to write something like C#. You're still going to learn some of the basics. You're going to learn the structure, the flow, the problem solving, hopefully. But you're just not going to learn any of the actual language or technique. You'll learn some of the techniques, but you're definitely not going to be directly ready for game dev right after that. You're going to need to learn some other things to switch in. I don't know anybody personally who does game dev in Java. I know that some people still do, but I think that it's a relatively small number of people. Most people are either using C++ or something like Unity and C#. Those are pretty much the only two things that I see people write games. Again, small number of people write things in Python and other random stuff, right? Or they write their games in JavaScript or Java, but most of them are going to be either in Unreal or Unity. So if you really want to get into game dev, I mean, you can learn Java and just make sure that you learn another thing along the way. Like I would recommend in this case learning Unity because C# and Java are so similar. So just learn Unity on your own on the side while you're going through the program to learn the Java side and learn some of the programming fundamentals. I don't know. What do you think, guys?
I mean, Java is a great gateway language for sure. To your point about C# and the similarity, so I think your advice is pretty solid.
Yeah, so if people are familiar with the history of the languages, C# is just Java with Microsoft branding. And this is as a major C# fan. I say this as somebody where C# is my favorite language. But to be honest, it's just Java, because what happened was, if you look at the history, it's effectively Microsoft trying to steal a large portion of the audience. But aside from that,
But they wanted to make it better, right? They wanted to make Java, but better. I mean, they wanted to fix the problem, make it all in their own.
I don't think it was holistic, though. I think it was a lot more to do with the fact that they wanted everyone to be using their platform. But yeah, I will admit
I would say it was different motivations, right? Like the Microsoft as a company is motivated by everybody come use Visual Studio, and a lot of the guys who developed it were motivated more by, this could be like Java, but we can make it so much better now that we know all of the the side effects and downfalls of Java, or the pitfalls.
I will say, like, there's a lot of syntactic sugar that has just fundamentally made C# better than Java in every way. The fact that Java can be exhaustingly long and tedious with things, especially take something as simple as exception handling. The way you have to bubble up exceptions with the throws in Java is just a nightmare compared to the way you do it in C#. But yeah, language details aside, I would say Java was the first language I really learned. Now, I did some VB before this. I did some basic, JavaScript and CSS and HTML stuff before that. But Java is the first language I could say I could program in. And honestly, I think it matters a lot less for game programming which language than, because I think, as Jason was saying, like 90% of programming is control flow and logic and all that stuff. And whatever engine you're using is going to have its own kind of quirks about how it works. And all of the stuff you need to learn about games, the concept of rigid bodies or physics or how colliders work, that's language specific, and you won't learn that if you learn C# separately anyway. So you're going to need to learn GameDev anyway, regardless of what language. And especially with Unity, Java to C# is such an easy transition. It's just Java but better, that I think you'll have no problems. So I wouldn't worry. I actually think learning Java is probably, this is a controversial statement, but I think Java is the best language to learn programming in, because it does some of the work for you, but not all of the work for you. There's other languages which are much more like messy and down to the metal, and there's other and C# has a way of like hiding away a lot of the magic by doing things with properties and other stuff. Java like forces you to long form out a lot of tedious, annoying things, but when you're done, you understand it, and you'll praise the fact that C# doesn't make you write them out the long way anymore, but you've taken the time to learn how it works. So it's controversial, but I actually think Java is the best language to learn to get into programming in general. And then you can migrate in whatever direction you want. So,
can we please change the name of the show to Syntactic Sugar? Because
we should have a segment, a Syntactic Sugar with Jason Story every week.
Oh, man.
A deep dive into the syntax.
That was great. It came off the tongue like perfectly. And we got bullet trees. We got Syntactic Sugar.
I just added it. I misspelled it wrong, though.
That's my new Kickstarter. I'm starting Kickstarter. Syntactic Sugar has a lot of synergy, and bullet trees.
I definitely spelled that wrong.
It'll just be a video of me standing in front of a white wall with like a glass of wine, talking about Java.
Speaking of college, there were a couple questions that popped up. I saw this one was up the top, and there are a couple more down below about just portfolios for new college grads. I guess it makes sense. People are starting to graduate right now. It's the end of the year for colleges, and they're asking for just advice on what to have in a programming portfolio. Let me see if I can scroll down and find one of the other ones too. Would you guys ever review portfolios? Want to know why I'm not getting hired? And then what was the other one down here? At least one more about just what kinds of things we would recommend for a programmer portfolio. Here it was, just out of college, basically. What do you guys think belongs in a good programming portfolio? Maybe we could see some of these programming portfolios and just take a peek at them real quick and give some advice on them while we're at it too. If anybody wants to link theirs, if you asked it and you want to just drop yours in the chat, maybe we'll take a quick look at them real quick too. But you guys have any advice? I've given lots of advice on this in the past, but I figure
I get them every few weeks. People are asking me for help with their resume before they apply for a job. So I get a lot of these questions.
I have no idea. Absolutely no idea.
Yeah, evaluating a programmer's portfolio is certainly not.
So yeah, how would you evaluate? So say it's you evaluating the portfolio. So like this is kind of like it's not a programmer, it's somebody else at the company. It's the designer, the lead, the studio lead. Like what sets aside a programmer if you're like comparing them? You're looking at all their resumes and their portfolios, Saleem. Like what would anything that stands out for you?
For me, it's just about, I mean, because you're just talking about a cross-discipline interview. It's just about how they view my discipline or, art or whatever, and how they've interacted with them in the past, how they've dealt with certain problems. You can give them an example, like a designer designs a raid that's somewhat complicated, and they want to do design janky, hacky ways to do it that circumvent, programming support for whatever reasons may be. Some are genuine, some are just because people don't like talking to people. How would the programmer handle that particular interaction? How would they fix a specific problem? We want to have a rising platform that does this. The designer says he can just do this by spawning an object and having it move and do all this crazy stuff. And that you can basically just give them an expression or a call that makes this like super simple. Like how would you handle that interaction? In some cases, I'm looking for them to say things like, grab them, get them in a meeting, talk to them. Also, maybe teach them about this, so in the future they understand, hey, like you can come talk to me about this, or these are the types of things that programming would rather handle because for performance reasons, things like that. So really, it's just about how that programmer wants to or can interact and speak design or art or whatever it may be, and also how they might react to a designer who can't speak programmer, and that's where like the teaching comes in. As far as analyzing a portfolio, like I couldn't, I could look at code like this code looks cool. Here's some code that I did. Can you tell me if mine is better? That's about all I can do.
But do you look at the code, or do you just prefer to look at other things? Like, what if you're seeing, say, you got like 5 resumes in front of you? Somebody says, "Hey, which 2 of these should we look at?" Is there anything that stands out on a programmer one that would make you want to look at them more than the others? I'm just kind of curious now. I know it's not something you have to do a lot as a designer, but I know you've had to do it at least a couple times in the past.
You'd be surprised. I definitely had to interview out of my discipline a whole bunch. Really, it's probably going to come down to when you're talking about out of discipline stuff, I'm not going to look at the individual code. I mean, maybe I'll just, venture in to see if maybe I can find some goofy mistake to make one stand out above the other. But really, it'll just come down to, like, I guess I'd look at their history. If they're kind of close, maybe I'll go online and do some investigation on them, maybe look on LinkedIn or wherever and see how other people have felt about them, just to get a general feel for who I might like more. I might ping some people in the industry that I know, see if they know them, stuff like that. If you're talking about basically, 2 resumes that are similar, that are out of discipline. Obviously, if it's an artist, it's a very different experience because you can go look for, the visual creativity there. And of course, in discipline is very different. So that's probably what I would do. I'd do a little due diligence to choose one or the other. But in the end, if it's that close, I'm probably like, let's just get them both scheduled and get them in the office and run them through the gauntlet.
Interesting.
I've heard that the teamwork is of course very important in all environments, especially on a game dev team.
Yeah.
Is there a good way to communicate through a portfolio that, hey, not only can I do the coding stuff, test me on that, I got that, but I'm also great at working in teams. I'm a nice person. I don't get hurt and lash out at people. I'm not toxic. I'm going to be someone that you want to work with. Is there a way to project that through a portfolio? I
don't think you can do that through a portfolio specifically, unless you're, I mean, I think designers may actually have an advantage here because a design portfolio, if they have one, is going to be about, hey, look at this cool thing I did in Tomb Raider, and they're going to talk about all the things that went into doing that theoretically, which will give you a hint of teamwork. This guy worked with a programmer and artist on this, so maybe they, absorb some knowledge from that, and obviously they have some working relationship. So I don't know that a programmer or an artist has that advantage unless they did something similar in their portfolio, which I don't see why you wouldn't actually, because it makes the layman, it makes it easier for them to understand what you're trying to express to them. If I say here's the whole system that was done, and here's my part of it, and that's how it fed this whole thing, you can show them the big picture, and people can obviously digest that. But outside of portfolio, this is where things like recommendations and stuff can come in if people want to go that far. Somewhere on your portfolio or LinkedIn or whatever, just as a part of your resume. Here's my recommendations. Talk to these people. I worked in this system with this person or whatever. That stuff could help. It definitely gives them, like I said, if I'm going and doing some due diligence, doing some further investigation, you can now control that narrative by giving me names of people or whatever that I can go now look them up or ask them and get a little bit more information about you and find out if you are a team person, maybe get some idea of the type of culture you've been in. So yeah, I mean, I think you could. I don't think portfolio is specifically the place for that, but you could probably kind of imply your experience by being more broad in the examples you're giving.
So I actually did this earlier this week. I was looking through portfolios and I helped with the hiring of somebody. And I specifically had this exact situation. And so I find the best way to answer these questions is to flip them. And so I'll explain it from my perspective, how I see it, and that help inform your decisions of how you should frame yourself. So here's the secret when people are hiring somebody for a job like that. Now, I can't vouch for every company or bigger companies than just a couple of people, but usually you're hiring one of two things. You either have a dedicated problem you need to solve, and so you're looking for expertise, or quite frankly, you're hiring someone who's like a graduate who you don't mind training in-house. You want more hands on keyboards who can learn the in-house stuff. And in the first case, I want to see experience, and in the second case, I want to see willingness to learn. Two vastly different that's specifically the one thing I'm looking for. What's interesting to me is I can tell a lot more about how a portfolio is written than actually what's in it. Because if you've been in any industry for long enough, there's a level of certainty in the way you describe yourself. Your portfolio starts to read like statements of, I worked here, I did this, I did this. I don't need to justify to you that there's none of these statements like I worked well, efficiently in a team with whatever, because if you've worked at enough jobs, you don't have time to fill in all of this gibberish because you're just listing the stuff you've done, and you can have that conversation in the interview. If you're a graduate, you're staring at an empty page with nothing to fill out. So you're desperately trying to pad your resume with anything that says you've ever been nice to people or worked on various things. And so now some people see that as a detriment or a positive, but it's not. It's more an indication of the kind of person I'm hiring. If I see a resume that's like basically proving itself, constantly telling me, I can work with people, I'm nice, I can do this stuff, that tells me they're a graduate. And sometimes you want that. Sometimes you're like, cool, this person is eager, willing to learn, and we can bring them in and we can teach them and they'll be a good asset to the team. But if I'm hiring, like, I need someone to solve this problem and I've written down 3 years of experience required minimum, and that's what it reads like, then it reads to me like they're over-exaggerating the work they've done. And they've probably been on a team that was experienced, but they probably didn't do that much because the attitude of the resume is full of self-doubt. And I can tell that just by reading it at the start. So that's step one on the resume. Step two, as for the question of can you say that you're affable or friendly or whatever, I would say the way you do it is actually more subtle. There's implications in how you spend your time. So rather than ever state anything that puts you in that camp of being a nice person, in the interest section, I just put a bunch of dotted things like I worked at Coder Dojo teaching kids. I did this, this, and this, various different things. And then that's implied. Like you're not going to be, if you're the kind of person to dedicate your free time to help teaching kids programming, you're probably not at least a bad person, right? That's usually, you're doing it in some kind of capacity to try and help. And so those things are usually implied as interesting. But to be completely honest, That's what a interview's for. Most people have decided whether you have the skills or not long before you get to the interview process, because the resume will be like, we need this person or this person. Now they just have to not screw it up. If they're okay in the interview, they've probably got the job. And so all of the like, do I want to work with you stuff tends to come out of the interview. That's more of a case of, if someone's a good interviewer, they actually aren't quizzing you on your resume. That's a sign of someone who has done it a lot or hasn't. If someone hasn't interviewed a lot, they're reading the resume and like asking you questions on it. If someone is a good interviewer and has done this a lot, they're just trying to get you talking. They're just trying to start a conversation with you, and they're going to ask you about your day, what games you're playing, what kind of person you are, and they want to get you talking about stuff. And you'll hear questions like, oh, you worked on this project? That sounds kind of cool. What was that like? And then get them to talk about the process, because what you're looking for is when people start rambling about a topic they enjoy or they worked on, you learn a lot more about what their thoughts were, because they'll sort of free associate and start talking about stuff. And that tells you if they actually know what they're talking about, or if they're like pausing to put in the statements they read in the programming book that matches the terms. And so you want people just free associatively talking about a topic, because if they start energetically talking about it, you're like, okay, they're researching this. They're bringing up names of books or authors, or they're talking about games they like and mechanics they liked in those games. This person is passionate about it, the topic. And so they're a good hire. If someone's not engaging with the questions and you're earnestly trying to get them to talk about it, they're not wanting to talk about the topic that they supposedly are looking for a job in. And that's more of a red flag than anything else, because it looks like they're treating it like a kind of a journeyman programming thing instead of a something they're going to actually enjoy and engage with. So long story short, the resume is literally just a litmus test for, do you have the things we want? And if you want a good resume, then just make sure it matches what the company's looking for. Read the job posting, make sure as much of what you have that's relatable is there, get them in. And then once that's started, then it's all about just being a fun person in the interview. So do those two things and you'll probably nail it all. That's it.
Good advice, man. I think customizing that resume is really important too, and a lot of people don't do it. I did it every single time I've ever applied for something. I customized the resume, at the very least, rearranging things so that the topics that are the most important to them are the ones that are at the top of my skills. Like if I know that this job has a lot of database work or something, or is Unity or Unreal is going to pop to the top, whichever one's going to be whichever one's the most important will be at the top, and then move the things that are irrelevant or not really related to the job way down to the bottom, or even cut them off.
100%, yeah.
Right, so that it doesn't seem like I'm an Unreal developer who only knows a little bit of Unity, or have both right next to each other. Then it seems like, oh yeah, they're both like just listing out the engines, right? You start listing everything too. Start listing everything that you have a little bit of experience with. Especially all at the same level. Like nobody's gonna believe you know every single programming language. Right, so just put the things that are important to the job and that right up the top and highlight that shit.
And that's one of those things that the unfortunate truth is you just find this. So I'm pretty good at interviews. I've gotten most interviews that I've taken. But just like everyone else, I've always been afraid of my resume, because when I was younger, I had nothing on it. And so I also had I work great with people, I volunteer and help out, and I was in the chess club and all the other like nonsense stuff that pads it out, because I had nothing else to say. I had no work experience. As time went by and I had more work experience, I'm now in the luxury position of I can have a CV entirely out of enterprise stuff, entirely out of backend stuff, or entirely out of various different VR and AR projects, if that's the job I'm applying for, or just various other Android or mobile stuff, and I can make a resume that says I worked on these projects relative to what you're asking for, and then I can have a chat with them and kind of go into the rest of the details afterwards. So the truth is, there's not much you can do to make your resume any better than the literal facts of what you've done or haven't done, because at the end of the day, it's a filtering mechanism. It's to get you past the gate. It's your ticket. It's just to get you in the door. Almost all of the work happens once you've gotten into the interview, in my opinion, at least. So I would say that if you're a student, the truth is you're just not interesting as on a resume. Instead, try to look like someone they want to work with, because you're not going to win them by experience that you don't have. Instead, just be a cool person. Talk about fun projects and hobbies. It's more interesting for me to read about, here's your website where you put up Unity projects and I can see stuff, and here's your code, and here's the stuff you're interested in. Even if you've got no actual job experience, I'm like, well, this person is interested. They're going to spend their free time. If I give them a task to do, they can go off and learn it themselves, because that's what I used to do as a programmer. If someone gave me a job, I'd spend the entire weekend learning about the systems, like watching Pluralsight courses, because I was excited to learn new stuff. And that is the best thing to an employer, because it means they're going to basically work for free. They're going to take all of the training and do it off the time of the clock. And so if you can find someone who's passionate about the topic, that's gold right there. So they don't actually, if you're a student and you don't have experience, don't try to upsell yourself. Instead, just be practical about, the stuff that you have done, and try to build side projects, and just be somebody that looks like they would be trained well, because that's what they're really looking for. Someone who they can actually bring in and train, and who will work well with everyone else.
Yeah, double down on being a student and show them that you're hungry and eager, because if they're going to hire a student, they're probably looking for a student or something at that level. To your point, I was giggling earlier, not at you, sir, just at the statement that you apparently can make talking about drying paint very interesting. And I thought that might be a part of your syntactic sugar. But I agree with that statement. So it made me giggle a little bit. It's a pleasure to listen to.
That's one of those, again, if we're talking about like little life tips, this may sound silly, but it's not. I wasn't always good at talking about things. There was one of those, that's not instinct. That's sort of just a hobby, and part of life and having to communicate with people. You learn this stuff.
Yeah.
And I've realized the most valuable thing you can show is passion. And so once you get into the mindset of being passionate about whatever you talk about, people enjoy it, because they enjoy and engaged with, like anybody can, if they're talking about stamp collecting or whatever else they like, if they're passionate about it, there's clearly something interesting in it that you want to know why they're passionate about it. And so all I've learned is that if I engage with topics, I try to put my mindset in the position of engaging with it honestly about what the coolest things about it are.
Yep.
And it just makes talking about everything easier, and people tend to enjoy it more.
I wanted to just mention one last thing on that before I hit the button on this new question, which was that Saleem had brought up LinkedIn, and just having an actual profile on there and having it be like clean and have some actual stuff there. And I think that that's a really good idea, because there's still a large number of people that's just what they look at. There are a large number of people in corporate offices that LinkedIn is the first thing they're going to. And if your thing there is empty, it's going to be a ding against. What's that?
I got my first ever corporate job through LinkedIn, so exactly that.
And I mean, even game companies, like they'll still, a lot of the people there, that's what they do. They look at LinkedIn, and if you have recommendations there from friends that you went to school with and worked on projects with, or anything else like that, anything that you can get on there will help. Or just having a couple positive notes on there of people saying nice things about you. You can just ask your friends, hey, that you worked with, go write a little review about me on there, whatever, and write them back and forth. Give a little bit of positive feedback, it'll go a long way. And don't have your search results be something terrible, right? So when they search for you, it's a picture of you driving drunk and jumping off a bridge or something.
Wow.
Who knows? I don't know.
Clear your old vines.
I don't know that story.
You don't have some crazy stuff. So there was a question about a lack of being able to stay focused, and the hard desire to just keep optimizing stuff that you don't need to necessarily optimize. And I've struggled with this a lot. Me and Jason have talked about this a lot, but it's I don't know. It's something that's worth, I guess, bringing up. And I think here the point is that if you get where you're just constantly optimizing things and trying to rewrite things and just not making progress, I don't even know how to advise to stop it. Just stop doing it. Stop optimizing things until they actually become a problem. Stop optimizing things until they're really a performance issue. I've seen way too many people just optimize games and never come anywhere near finishing the thing. Like, they just get started, they write a little bit of code, and then they optimize and optimize and optimize, and they have 5% of a game done, and then they get bored of it and quit, and then either quit doing game dev or move on to a new game and start something else. They build out the entire game and then optimize it afterwards. Most games that are built and actually released have relatively terrible code, and they're really unperformant up until right before they get released. A lot of them, they just run like crap. Everybody's running on these super high-end systems, and then last second they're crunching to fix it up. And I don't recommend that you go all the way to that extreme, but I do recommend that you constantly make progress and only optimize when it actually matters. Don't optimize out little things. Remember, you're running on insanely fast hardware. The hardware by the time you release is going to be even faster. you don't need to optimize out tiny little stuff unless your game is something crazy, in which case you should still just build the game first and then optimize it, I think. Anyway.
100%. There's two kinds of game devs. There's ones who are hyper focused on optimizing their code or on writing the cleanest code possible, and there's people who make games. Because if you spend your time doing either of those things, the unfortunate truth is all you're doing is finding a way to justify procrastination. Because the truth is, whether it's tool development or optimization or fiddling with your UI or whatever else, these are all just ways of messing around in a way that feels productive.
Yeah.
It feels like you're doing something, but you're not really doing something. You're just sort of messing about for the sake of messing about. So the life lesson is ask yourself, are you trying to learn or are you trying to make a product? If you're trying to learn, that's okay. You don't have to make a product. It's like nobody's telling you have to do it. You can just enjoy learning if that's what you're doing. But if you are making a game, if that's what you're actually trying to do, then take a step back, ask what your goals are, and a very simple exercise. Write down where you want to be in 2 years. Write down where you want to be in 1 year, 6 months, 3 weeks, 1 week, and then tomorrow. And then move yourself towards tomorrow. That's it. If you're doing anything else other than the thing that's on your tomorrow to-do list, you're procrastinating. You're just actively choosing to do something that's more fun than what you need to be doing. So depends what you're going for. Make the game or learn things.
I would say though that there's value for, at least for those who are at that point where you know, like myself, I'm still learning, and optimization often, excuse me, is not so much about optimization, but about making sure I'm doing things in the best possible way and not hurting myself in the future. I know I've had plenty of experiences where I've done some coding and then, you know, 3-4 months later, I realized, wait, things are breaking. What's going on here? And I realized, oh, 3 months ago, I was working on this one thing. It's not very well done. It's not optimized. And now I have to go back and change everything because I didn't spend some amount of time just looking it over and asking myself the important question, is this the best way it can be? Now, I do get the point. Don't spend all your time doing that because you're going to end up, you know, spending all your time doing that and never moving forward. However, I personally find value in, you know, building a system out and then going back and looking at it and saying, okay, how can I make this better? Doing some tweaks to make it better. But at some point you do need to prioritize and say, okay, it's good enough. And now I need to move on.
Yeah.
Well, I want to, because a few people have said this, I want to make this very, very clear. Refactoring is not the same as optimizing. I am not saying don't refactor. I am saying don't optimize. They are a hugely, hugely different thing. The difference is you refactor when you've got a solution and you move it to a better solution. You optimize when you're trying to eke out as much performance as you can before the thing has become a problem. That is the huge difference. If you're in a situation where you've tested something and it works, but it's slow and you want to start making it slightly better, that's fine. But if you're at the point where it works, nothing is slow at the moment, but you're going to go spend 2 weeks learning to make a faster algorithm, despite it not holding you up or impacting your performance right now in any way, that's optimization. That's the difference. I will never say that refactoring shouldn't be done. In fact, I think if you're following good principles, you should make it work, make it fast, and then make it good, make it clean, make it fast. Follow that cycle. And if you're doing it right, you're doing it in small spurts. So 100%, Andrew, the way you do it is exactly what I'm talking about. You will make it work. I've like seen you do a thing, it will work. And then you'll be like, okay, but it doesn't work the way I want to. It's a mess or it's hard to work with. And then you'll start fixing it, right? That's fundamentally different, I think, than somebody who's going to sit and plan all of these like micro memory shuffling optimizations for something which has like 10 objects in it. It's nonsense. There are people who, the reason I'm saying this is because there's two kinds of people who ask that question. The kinds of people who are actually saying, should I optimize my stuff, is usually the people who already know in their heart they're wasting too much time optimizing and they're looking for justification to say that it's okay. It's usually not, or it's the people on the other end of the spectrum who are making games and it's not optimized and they're worried that it'll bite them in the ass later. And in both of those cases, the truth is if it starts to become a problem, you can fix it. And if you're the kind of person who's over optimizing, you're going to be wasting your time. So I'm being harsh about this on purpose because it's just generally like more people waste time not doing the thing they think they should be doing than people who are under optimizing. They're less of those that matter than the people who are using things like optimization as an excuse to not get work done.
I think that's Dead on. And I think the other thing that people don't miss, I had noticed in chat, there's the let me scroll down and just click it and pop it up here. The message about the string compares. I did a video where I talked about performance, and in Vanguard, one of the big issues was millions of string compares every frame, right? You could people were optimizing all kinds of stuff. The game was getting optimized constantly. People were spending tons and tons of time optimizing it. But without just profiling and hitting the important thing, it didn't make any difference, because like this one little thing is way bigger than everything else in the game for just killing performance, knocking people down to like 1 frame a second. So like pre-optimizing, like Jason's saying, is usually relatively pointless. Just actually profile it, test it out, and try things as you're going along, and fix the things that are actually hindering people from playing your game or making it so that there's an actual problem in it. You know, try it out on your min spec constantly, and only optimize when you're not hitting that, when that's not working, and fix the problems that are causing it to not work.
Like there's a million ways to learn to do this. Like people don't realize that I guarantee there's optimizations that I can point out that people haven't thought of before. Like, for example, most people don't realize you can put your constructors for your structs into unsafe mode, so you can actually initialize a struct without setting all of the values. But if you do that, it'll obviously it's not a safe thing to do, but it means it's not going to allocate the values in the size of the default values. So you'll have to do that yourself. And so that actually takes, if you're doing composite objects, you've got nested structs, it's actually more performant technically to not initialize all your objects and then do it yourself when you need to. But that's like insane level of optimization. Same with lowering stuff. If you get into how to write your code to actually control the lowering process as part of the Roslyn compiler, you can, like, I'm not saying I don't know how to do some of these like niche optimize, like they are there. It's just the amount of people I see that waste their time doing it. And if you do, to answer the question on burnout, again, I'm not saying be solid on one thing either. You can make tasks for yourself that involve other aspects of the business. Like I do this all the time. If I'm working on a project, I'll have one task to design a UI, one task to write the tab system, one task, whatever. I mean, I'm giving myself leeway to jump back and forth to do things if I have burnout in one topic. But there's a huge difference between every one of those being progress in one direction versus like arbitrarily refactoring my code for 2 weeks because it doesn't feel perfect yet, which I've done. Like I've been that guy where I would spend 2 weeks refactoring and tidying my code because it's like, I don't like the contracts here, and maybe I could put another interface here. And it's like, I'm not making a game anymore. I'm just sort of, it's mental exercise. I'm doing a jigsaw puzzle. That's my own code base. And so I think people realize this themselves. If you're being honest with yourself.
And this, I mean, what we're talking about certainly expands beyond programming. It just goes just general, creative type stuff, building anything, as far as a process of prototyping, white boxing, all that type of stuff, because get it working, see how well it works, iterate, all these things. But do you guys think there is value? There's certainly value in it for me when I get this way. Do you think there's any value, even if you're trying to do something solo, where you just grab someone and just rubber duck with them and just be like, hey, I'm like over optimizing here, or I think I need to do this. This isn't perfect. Because, you rubber duck something, you just need to say it out loud. Sometimes you go, you know what, this isn't valuable. But in your example of, people who make games and people who are learning, sometimes, maybe just those two people need to get together and then they can make something like super awesome or something, or they can just call out each other on these things. But it seems it's helped me in the past, because I have been that guy who has been like noodling and just trying to eke out this perfect thing, or this perfect timing of an animation frame, or just when something would trigger, all these crazy things, realizing that in the grand scheme of things, in a game where there's a billion players around, there's all kinds of effective stuff going off, this little thing, I'm the only person that's going to notice that it was off by half a second. And I've had to just call someone, text them, whatever, and just say to them this ridiculous thing that I'm doing, and have them look at me like I was the biggest moron in the world, for me to go, oh crap, I am actually being a moron about this. I should probably get my work done. So you guys think there's value in that? Would you advise that people do that if they feel like they're getting that way, or just try to resolve it themselves?
But that's why teams are usually better, right? Especially with pair programming stuff, because if one person has that instinct of going, I'm just going to spend the next 5 hours just like noodling on this small thing or making sure this is perfect, they're not, you feel ashamed doing that when somebody else is sitting there waiting for you. And so you're not going to be like renaming a variable 9 times and going back and forth and doing this kind of stuff. So I find even just shaking you out of your own bad instincts by having a second person there is almost always valuable.
Yeah,
Yeah. I talk to myself a lot. And I try very hard to be a little introspective and really ask myself, what am I doing here? Why am I doing it? And is this what I need to do next? Now, I'm not big on optimization because I just don't know how to do it and stuff like that. But I will go down rabbit holes with things where I'm like, wait, now I need to do this. Now I need to do this. And then I need to catch myself and say, stop what you're doing. Go back. What was the original problem? And so, yes, teams would be great. Yes, an accountability partner or whatever you want to call it would be an amazing thing to have. But for those who are sitting at home and you're working on a project, I would suggest just talking yourself out loud. Yeah, use your voice out loud. If you're living with people, confuse the heck out of them that you're talking. But talk to yourself and ask yourself those questions. Is this the right thing to be doing right now? What is the goal today? And how do I get there as effectively and efficiently as possible in the time I've got left?
This little thing behind me, this whiteboard here, that's my buddy. It gets me away from my computer. I grab a marker, I write stuff down. It detaches me from whatever I'm doing and forces me to just do some thought exercising, which can actually be huge because, a live person, rubber ducking with them is great. Talking to yourself, obviously, I'll do it. Introspection is hard. People don't realize how hard it is, but when you do it, you will find that, hey, I actually have some intelligence in here and someone is screaming at me to stop doing this. I'm just not hearing them. But like, if you can do something where you just step away from it all, and you can, like I said, whiteboard, it's my buddy. I sit and write, even if it's 5 minutes, whatever, sometimes that'll just pull me completely out of something, and I'll be able to get back on track. So yeah, like if you can find some way to do it, but in most cases I find for me, it's just literally stepping away from it all and just like letting my brain just kind of chill a little bit. And then that brings you back to some sort of reality that's sensible.
For me, it's much more the feedback from other people. I gotta talk to people and see if I try to plan things out, I'll constantly just overplan and put too much thought into optimizing things and making things perfect and trying to do that. I even do that like with YouTube videos. I'll struggle to try to like make them just done instead of perfect when I can realize that I'm the only one that's going to see the difference in this thing. Like I can go back and make this edit and make these changes over and over. But like for staying on top of just getting things done, having just other people to report to, again, like we kind of mentioned at the beginning, has helped me a lot to avoid like the optimization traps, because if you just do that, then you don't have any progress to report when you're going back and talking to the people that you talk to regularly and sharing stuff with. So
Jason bugs me all the time. Always.
And there was a question, I popped it up here about keeping simple documentation, which you kind of started talking a little bit about keeping track of things in Trello or keeping track of tasks that you're doing in whiteboards and stuff. And I've mentioned before that now I just use Milanote for it because it's freaking awesome. But I do definitely recommend setting up some sort of documentation for your solo game development, either on paper, if that's the way you like to do it, or on a whiteboard or something. Or again, my preferred tool right now is just Milanote because it's relatively flexible and allows me to do a lot of that stuff. What do you guys think on just I assume you all document anything that you're developing solo as a game. Like you're actually building out a game. Hey, Andrew, you're going through this process right now, right? Like,
I'm trying to be better at it. So I have not traditionally documented anything. And recently I've taken the course of releasing some of the key components of my game, some of the key systems that I've been developing as on the asset store for others to use. And the side effect of that, and this is partly on purpose, is that I then have to document it in order to do the right thing for the people who are going to pay money to use this in their games. So I've been using Gitbook. I think it's gitbook.com or gitbook.io to basically write down everything about the scripts I've been producing that are going to be on that. Now, I haven't taken the next step.
It's basically
I haven't taken the next
stored on GitHub,
Yeah. I haven't done the next step of doing that for my own internal stuff that I'm not releasing to folks. I probably should, because I've already, gotten to the point where, 3 weeks later, I come back and think, wait, how did I do that? What was the mechanism I was using to accomplish this task? And I just have to spend 20 minutes trying to refigure out what it was I was doing, because I'm not going to remember everything. And so I think it would be a smart idea for myself to do that. And at the side, if I ever decide to release the entire game source code as one big project you can buy, then that would be already a thing. But certainly Getbook.io has been a tool that I've been enjoying using. I like the look of it. It's easy to use, and once it's set up, it looks pretty, and it's easy to kind of just figure out, oh, what does what basically.
Yeah, and I'm currently using Mininote for a few projects myself. Actually, I probably send you that, Jason, because we were talking about it. I will say though, on a more holistic approach, this conversation, when it comes to documentation, it's actually a lot less about the tools or how or where you use it. It's more a matter of why you're doing it. And so a lot of people don't realize that the important thing is actually the communication aspect, not actually anything else. And so an example of this is if you talk to a therapist or anybody who's done research into the general field of how people store and maintain memories, what you learn is that the brain is really weird. It's really cool how it does a lot of stuff. And one of them in particular is the fact that we're capable of storing ideas that we haven't fully formed yet. It's hard to describe, but people are able to maintain ideas in their head that are in this like nebulous partial state. And it's not until you have to write it down or explain it to somebody that you have to take these half ideas and turn it into language. You have to decide what those words mean. And so what a lot of therapists tell people to do when they're stressing out about something is write down what it is. Because if you write it down, you have to formulate your thoughts, formulate your feelings, and write it down. And it's the same principle for rubber ducking or for pair programming or for anything else. The point isn't what you're doing. It's the fact that in order to do it, in every case, you have to sit, reason about it, and turn it into language or in some description of some way that's actually concise and structured. And so it doesn't matter what tool you use, but pick something that forces you to sort of linguistically explain what you're doing. And in doing that, you'll simplify it. I rubber duck. I do the same thing Andrew was saying. I basically talk to myself and I treat it like there's somebody I'm teaching what I'm doing to. And I explain it to them slowly and I go through it. And if I'm having trouble explaining it, it means that I've designed something so complicated that I can't even explain it. And if I can't explain it, I've taken a wrong turn. So I backtrack and I go, what am I really trying to do? Well, I'm trying to do X. How do you do X? Well, if I had a Y, I could do X. So I'm making a Y so I can do X. Now I can go back and say, that's what I'm really doing. I can throw all the rest of the crap away and follow this structure. So it's about communication. If you can, and that's why it all plays into each other. If you learn to communicate better as a person, you'll find your thoughts are clearer. It's a weird thing to say, but like, the reason, again, I'm so harsh on this topic is I was that guy. I unironically used to spend 2 weeks going to a coffee shop every day with a pad of paper, and I would write class diagrams and charts and interface structures, and I would plan over and over and over, and I would do 15 designs of the same stat system or the same health system because, I don't like that references that or that injects that, and maybe I should have a separate, or could this technically be 2 interfaces, or is 4 interfaces too much because technically a repository has gets and set portions, and I'd go through this whole giant thing, and I'd never get any work done because all of it's this conceptual mess of nonsense. And it wasn't until I started really thinking about it and I read that book, which really got me thinking about the act of getting things done and how I approached it. And I started approaching it from the perspective of language, where I phrase it as something that actually needs to be done. Right now, I can't X, but by the end of when I'm done, the system can now X. It is a thing that it can do. And I split that up, I describe it, I figure out how to turn the tasks, and I do the tasks. And so the reason I'm so hard on things like optimization is because optimization is one of those things people never write down. They never write down, make this algorithm faster. That's where people are actually doing it to solve a purpose. What people are actually doing is they're using optimization as a way that technically it's always better and doesn't require me to ever justify my actions. If you write down a task, solve it, and do it, you've got milestones you can check off. You are being productive in the right direction towards your goal. So I think it's a lot more to do about language, how you communicate, and specifically that you're actually moving towards a goal and not deluding yourself, that you're making progress just because it's technically better.
Yeah,
I thought that was great.
I like your point about
again, this is around from a personal perspective. This is like me shouting it past me because I spent years wasting my time approaching this the wrong way. So
I thought you were shouting it past me and all my notebooks full of class diagrams and shit that I bring to meetups and start discussing my class diagrams and figuring things out, trying to over architect and over plan everything.
I do like the point of optimization just kind of being a thing, because you can just do it infinitely. If you got to report to someone,
you can just keep telling yourself you're doing it. Yeah.
If you're reporting to someone, you can be like, "Oh, I'm optimizing this stuff," and they can't really call you on, "Well, when is that going to be done?" Well, I'm optimizing. I'm just doing this thing. You can't, because they can't be like, "Well, don't optimize." Well, don't you want the game to run better? Well, yeah, but like you're like 3 weeks behind. Well, I'm optimizing, man. Like it's definitely one of those weird, like nebulous words that you can use. It sounds like fancy enough to like trick other people, and you could just do it forever.
Nobody will tell you to stop making it faster. Make it slower.
But why
You
is
don't
it
want
not
it
working?
faster.
Because I was told to not optimize. So you know.
Oh, so there's an art question about art portfolios, and I wanted to give this one to Andrew first to start, but I had some thoughts on it too. So go ahead, Andrew. What do you think about this one? Should they mention optimization stuff about 3D art in their portfolio and explain that stuff, or should they leave that out?
Probably. So I'm coming from the perspective of I've hired artists, and I'm looking for, when I do that, I'm looking for very specific things. I'm looking for the style to match the style I'm looking for. I'm looking for an understanding that they are going to create something that works in Unity, in a game engine that works in real time. That is going to be set up. Like when you look at if it's like a 3D model, are there sub meshes, and are those sub meshes logical for what I'm looking for? For instance, if you got a robot, can you take some of the parts off, and make new robots out of that? That's something that I like for my project. So what I'm really looking for is those things, which as a non-artist, I don't know all the nuances about how you do that. So if you start giving me a lot of the words and phrases that an artist would know that I don't know, I'm going to be a little bit lost. But can you communicate to me that you are able to take what I'm looking for and give me that? So if I give you a project, you're going to give me the end result that I need, that I'm looking for. And so, yes, I think understanding or being able to communicate how you get to a finished product is important. But really what I'm really looking for is, one, is what I need already in your portfolio? And if it's not quite there, are you the type of person that is able to understand what I'm asking for and get what I need, and have that two-way street communication that would, tell me that I'm not going to be spending all my time now trying to get you to make small changes in a language that I don't understand to get the final product that I need.
So that's fair. And I think for me, like, I'm also not an artist, and I rarely ever get to deal with hiring artists. But I do like to know that they understand how to optimize things for games, that they, have some examples of nice looking characters that are highly optimized, or nice looking art, whatever the type of thing is, that's highly optimized for games. And sometimes I like seeing like the original version, the high poly version, next to the optimized low poly version that you can see, or the LODs. A lot of times I've seen people do like really nice LOD layouts on their page to show the art in the different forms as they've optimized it along, and how good it still looks when it's, a couple hundred or a couple thousand polygons and a single material or something, like nice, and they like simplify the crap out of it. So I like being able, or seeing that stuff, but mostly for me, I like to be able to see that they have a variety of things, and things that are going to, again, like Andrew said, match the art style and the needs of the game. Because when we're hiring an artist, if we're only hiring one artist, then we're hiring them for a bunch of tasks. We need them to make a bunch of different types of things. We need them to kind of match the style, and whoever seems like they can make those things in that style is going to be the one that we're going to, and obviously have it run well and be game ready, is the one that we're going to look at first, or be the one that stands out.
So to kind of counter my own argument with the thing about programming, is when you hire a programmer, you expect them to write code that is good, works, and is somewhat efficient. Writing code that's easy to maintain and well architected is the bonus. That's the extra that shows quality that you enjoy. With an artist, the inverse is true, where you're hiring someone because they can produce nice, pretty art. That's the default. You wouldn't hire them if you didn't like what they're making. But if they can optimize it, that's the bonus. That's the extra kind of sauce on top. And so I quite like seeing, because I don't expect it. But because the amount of projects I've worked on where you get models from an art team, because sometimes people will hire artists not looking for game artists, then they'll hire you and they won't realize that the art isn't as usable as they think it is, because there's like n-gons and things that haven't been considered for the concept of how a game engine would use it. So I specifically like looking for little touches of indication that people care about the stuff they're producing. Mostly things that, one thing that I like particularly is I like seeing when a artist knows how to bake detail into textures that don't have to appear on the model geometry, because that to me is a big sign of someone could be the most talented artist in the world and make beautiful models, but if they start putting in geometry for every little like screw or nail or detail on a model, that's somebody who cares more about the visual fidelity of their product, of the artistry of their work, than the usability of it as a model. But if somebody understands that they can texture paint that and use like depth maps and normal maps to like really bring out that detail, that's somebody who cares more about making stuff that works for you. And so that's the stuff that I particularly like watching for. And of course, just the general, if someone's doing actual geometry, are they aware that, again, it'll have to be unpacked nicely, UV maps, and that'll be, can I hand it off to somebody else to repaint and sort of structure, or do they have some weird arcane way of doing it that's exclusive to them? So yeah, I mean, I quite like noticing that stuff myself.
So if you could only hire one artist, would you rather hire a technical artist who can, you know, produce all right work, but is a technical artist for a reason, or would you rather hire someone who can produce really cool, awesome stuff that you then, Jason, have to go back and make work?
I'd want the technical artist every time, because art is one of those things that you want more. The unfortunate truth is the thing that's often missing the most is sheer time. Models just take time to produce. And realistically, if someone's making beautiful work, but then someone has to spend 4 hours every time on top of everything they do, making it game ready, like that balloons out for every model across the project, and you've wasted so much time. So 100%, I want somebody who knows what they're doing, producing stuff that works for me. And honestly, like, you can find beautiful art from concept artists, and then you can give it up concept art to a technical artist. And a technical artist, if they're good enough, can usually like get pretty close just from the concept art, because the what you're paying for is the creativity of coming up with it. And then on the second, it's sort of, so yeah, I would say technical artists almost every time.
Yeah, I'd say the same, because I don't want to be in there fixing things constantly, and they can just get other art. If there's something they can't do, we can outsource that piece, and they can fix it up to match our game. You know,
outsource the concept and hire the technical artist. Gotcha.
Oh, and also, just as a side note, like, keep in mind, we're not saying you have to be super brilliant optimizing yourself. You just have to learn the tips and tricks of the trade. So, like with programming, if you're doing everything by yourself, you're kind of wasting your own time. There's lots of, like, you should be using IDEs that automate stuff for you. You should be using assets where appropriate. If you're an artist, you should be using the tools at your disposal. Like if you're making characters, we described last time, use one of the character creation type tools that gives you a base model that gets you halfway there. Or if you're doing texture work, use something that has like a whole texture library full of stuff, and then paint over it and add to it. So we're not saying that you have to be really good, but like, you should know when something is good. And so I find that you can find a lot of good artists who know how to optimize their workflow such that they can take something else, stack a few changes on top of it, even if they're using the automated LOD tools or whatever. As long as they can use the automated LOD tools, check if it looks good, fix anything that goes wrong, then they can spit out 3 or 4. They don't have to make 5 LODs themselves. It's just a case of, do they know their own trade well enough to know that you'll probably want some, you know, LODs of something that you're making? So I think it's more like, do they respect what you're using the models for? Or are they just doing it because it looks nice? And it's the same thing about programmers. You can hire a programmer who's so into code that all they care about is writing the prettiest code ever, and forget that they're trying to help you make a game. And they won't care if your game ever gets made. They care about, did they write the system? And so all of a sudden, they're wasting their time optimizing stuff that you don't even need optimized, because they enjoy the code more than they enjoy helping you with your task. And likewise with artists, you can find artists who will just go ham designing really pretty stuff, but you're like, yeah, but I need that for this game, and all of that stuff's useless to me. Like, it's cool, but it's irrelevant to what I need. And so they're people who are more into their own work than they are into actually helping you. And so it's having someone who respects what the use case of the work is more important to me, because it means they care about the life cycle. They're aware that their work touches other people's work, and there's a respect required for that cycle.
I think it also depends on if you're trying to be the artist who works on a team of artists, where each of you can do, one person sculpts, one person can then take that sculpt and make it low poly and whatnot, game ready. Or if you're going to be hired to do everything yourself, to be the jack of all trades from the sculpting down to the final product. And that does matter. I've seen a lot of people who I've tried to hire with great models but turns out they're really great in ZBrush, but they have no idea how to bring that into a game engine. And for whatever reason, they just didn't learn that. Maybe it's just they don't want to. Maybe it's just that they're really great at one thing. But unfortunately, I can't hire them because I need the full pipeline. I can't do any of that myself, and I can't hire a second person to come in and do something else. Same thing with animation. I hire people who can do the rigging and the animating themselves. I know those are separate things. One's much more technical, the other's much more artistic, but I can't afford to have somebody come in and do the rigging and then somebody else do the animation, especially since those two are tied so closely together that if they're not working tightly together, those two people doing those two different things, then they're going to have problems because somebody's going to rig something differently than the person's going to be doing the animation. And so now I end up hiring people who do both the rigging and the animation themselves. And that does limit the number of people I could hire. And it also means from an artist perspective, knowing what you want to do, what type of job you want to do, I guess would be important to understand what certain things you need to learn in order to be hireable for those jobs.
But I mean, there's an inherent value in a person in their discipline, at least trying to understand things outside of their specialty, simply because of the language barrier, right? Like I can speak, an animator who understands how to rig and all those things, they can speak. If they don't do it, they can understand that process so that they can speak to the rigger and things like that. And that's just true all over the place. You know, I make the point a lot that you know, I'm obviously not a programmer, but I understand logic, I understand object-oriented programming, I understand all these things, and it isn't because I have some vested like huge interest in doing it, although I actually do, but as a designer, I don't need to know that. I need to know how to script, I need to understand basic logic stuff so that and I need to be able to speak that language to other designers. But when I go and interact with a programmer, I need to understand, at least at some basic level, what they're telling me. You know, I'll have programmers just send me blocks of code, you know, in a Teams message when I ask them, hey, how does this thing work? And the fact that I've done a little bit of experimenting with it, I can read it and walk through it and speak to them in a way, okay, I think this is doing that. Can you explain a little bit more? So I think there's like an inherent value in not being just an artist or not being just a designer. There's a lot of value in understanding how to do these other steps, even if you don't want to do them, because you're going to indirectly learn a lot of stuff about your particular discipline. Certainly learn stuff about other disciplines if you're branching out. And it helps you, the person who's hiring, because you get multifaceted people. It's huge because it's obviously super valuable for you. But even on a personal project, obviously it's more valuable because then you don't have to. You can get advice from someone, and you can take that little bit of advice, a little nugget of knowledge, and then turn it into something larger without having to, you know, obviously expand out and get more people to rely on. So I think there's always an inherent value in someone being more than just this one thing. Specialization is obviously huge, but I'm big time jack of all trades type of guy. I think there's just a lot of value in just general curiosity about how other things work, because it can certainly inform how you do things. We talked about performance and stuff earlier. You know, I've had to interact with and fix and have seen designers do really, really crazy things with data, like just insane things with data. And it's just because the engine or the game they're working on allows them to do it. And these are super hyper creative people who just want to do something cool. So they don't ask the question they need to do. They just figure out how to do it. And it ends up being this crazy thing. But if they just had some like basic knowledge of some other stuff, or if they just spoke to people and were able to speak with people, some people are just uncomfortable speaking with people because they don't know how to speak code or speak art or whatever, then those problems could be resolved. And you wouldn't have to go back and refactor or optimize. A bunch of words have been coming up today. And you can spend less time on that and more time on making something that's cool and fun and really clean in the end. So it's just, you know, I think I started this question with the technical artist thing. But it is interesting when you think about that type of stuff.
I'm 100% in the same boat. Like I'm jack of all trades type myself, and I think anybody who knows me for work stuff, very clearly programming is the thing I do the most. I spend the most time on. So I reject the statement where people say there's just you should specialize in one thing and you don't have time enough in the day to do all these different things. Like I've got the artistic talent of a dead ferret. I'm useless. I can't do anything. Like, it's horrible. Everything today, I can't model. I can't texture paint. I can't do
You're
that
better
stuff.
than me.
You know, but what I can do though is I can open those tools. I have taken a few weeks over my life, 2 weeks here, a week there. I have made models. I have done textures. I have done ZBrush modeling. I have no intention of ever doing it as a career, but it's a matter of respect for the people I work with. I know what I'm asking. If I'm asking someone to rig something, I know how hard rigging is because I've bloody done it. And I know how annoying it is trying to paint the mesh to make sure it deforms correctly and stuff because I've done it. I would never do it myself because it would take me like a week to do something that would take someone talented like a day or even less. And so I just don't buy this idea that you said, oh, well, there's just too much. I can't take the time. Honestly, you're not asking to be professional. You're not asking to hire yourself in that role. You're asking to respect the trade. And so just taking a few weeks every year to learn different random things over the course of your entire career, you'll eventually get a passing understanding of everything. Like I'm in a lucky position. I can have conversations with everyone from the business side down to the DB administrator because I've made a point of learning what their job is. Why does a project manager get up in the morning? What is their conversation they're about to have? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to achieve? And then when they talk to a senior developer, what is their job? What are they trying to achieve? What are the kinds of conversations and arguments they're going to have? And how can you help mitigate and work with those people? And so I just think more people should just take a few weeks here and there to learn things. Like it's not that big of a deal to learn everything from video editing to sound design. Like just open up, FL Studio, do a 30-day trial or something and just learn how to make sound. It could be the worst song in the world, but you now understand what it takes. And then when you hire somebody, you know what you're asking. And that just like the amount of power that gives you, knowing how much work you're asking of people is so good. Like it gives you so much understanding of how everything that you're interacting with works.
There's in a studio that Jason and I worked at before, one of the guys there, he would always tell me, he'd always say this thing to me, I'm paraphrasing that. Basically, if you study something, I think it was like for 5 days, for a couple hours a day, you now know that thing better than 99% of other people. And when you think about it, if you spend an hour or two just opening up some software and messing with it for a week, that's not a huge chunk of your time out of your week to do other things you might want to do or that you need to do. But then after that, you come on the other side of that time, and now you've basically kind of plugged in this new piece of memory for this thing. So now you can speak to that, and obviously there's maintenance involved, that type of stuff. You should probably want to get a refresher or just actively talk about it to keep it fresh in your memory. But the little things like that, you don't realize that just an hour here or there, it's actually can be pretty huge for you over time, especially if you're looking for a long career and doing things and branching out. If you want to do your own project that's like completely solo, there's just a lot of things you need to learn. And if you can like sneak in any time here or there, get some time to talk to some people about stuff, it can be huge for you. Very huge.
It can also make you respect what you're missing because a lot of people don't think about music or sound in games, or they don't think about level design as separate tasks. Or if people are new to games, they don't understand why you'd need a concept artist as a first separate thing from having a modeler or an artist. And these are things because you've never done it. But if you've ever tried to model and you don't have a concept artist on the team, all of a sudden you're like, man, I wish there was a concept artist because it would make my life so much easier if I had something to look at and something to work towards. And so it makes you respect all the different layers and why those jobs exist as well.
Yeah.
Oh, and actually, another side of that's very good. It also helps you catch bullshit. So this is another side note. when you're at a point in your life where you've done a little bit of every one of those jobs, and if you get further in your career and you start being part of hiring or part of meetings, a lot of people in professional fields know their own lingo enough that they can use it like a shield. So you can be in a meeting and they'll talk to their managers and they'll start talking about stuff going, oh, I had to do this and optimize this and I had to do this and whatever. Yeah, and when they start doing that, it's really great. Like the amount of times I've been able to say, right, but we're using this service. So actually you just need to do that, right? If you just apply this and call that function and do this, they're like, oh yeah, I suppose I could do that. So you'll have it done today? Yeah, I'll get it done. Like, there we go, done. None of this, like, I know you're pulling a fast one and I'm able to talk to like, and the thing is, if I'm being fair, it's not always mean or meant to be sneaky either. So here's an example I have from a project management side of this. I've been in many meetings where the business side asks a question like, can we do X? And then someone on the programming side says, no, we can't. And that's where I can stop and I can say, I know what you mean. Technically, the question they asked is impossible, but what they're asking to do is this. Can we do this using the systems we have? And they'll say yes. And so you can fast track around a problem because you understand the difference between some programmers will analytically read a statement and they'll give you the technical correct answer. And that's often not what matters. That the business side is asking for something to be done and the programmers think their job is to turn it magically into do lists. And so they'll often get really like pig-headed about giving direct answers. And so I find having the ability to talk those languages lets you decipher what they're really meaning and what the programmers are actually like. When they give a very curt answer, you can say, no, that's not actually what they're asking. Can we do this instead? And you can often go, oh yeah, I'm sure we can do that. And then it like solve problems. So it's definitely good to know your fields.
That's where the communication comes in handy. Being able to communicate cross disciplines, understand what people are really saying.
Yeah, knowing some of those terms. I like the calling out the bullshit too, because you see that a lot. And just nonstop, especially as companies get bigger and people get lazier and you get more and more people. You're going to run into at least a couple people that are going to be bullshitting and trying to get out of work all the time. We had another question for Andrew, but before we jumped into it, I wanted to make everybody hit the thumbs up button and subscribe because at least half of them haven't done it yet. So just go over on the TV and the little button or whatever.
How do you do that? Do you do that? Just that?
Yeah, it's kind of like this, but you gotta like click. You put your finger over the mouse and click it, and just tap on your screen until it stays lit up. And then I also last week we missed the super chat. This week I'm gonna pay attention to them. So if anything pops up, I'll actually see it and not completely ignore it. I felt bad about that last week. I still didn't even see what it was. There was a question in there. So if anybody's got anything in there, I'll pay attention to those too. But I wanted to pop up this one for Andrew that Andrew called out because it was a great question. So you want to just jump on and take it?
Yeah. So I'm working on a game called I'm calling right now. Name might change. Legend of the Stones. And the story for this game, it's an RPG, large scale, and there's a story involved that the player gets to figure out. And I've been working on the story for quite a while. And the way I approach it is actually, I don't dive too deep into it. I don't try to answer all the questions. So I've got a world that is very fantasy in style. It's in many ways generic in that way. There's elves, there's orcs, there's humans and magic and all that. But what I'm mostly interested in is what is the questions that a player will be asking as they move through this world. And I haven't answered all of those. And I do that on purpose, partly because I've seen many people build out and spend way too much time, huge, storyboards where they know every character's name and backstory. That's cool. But is that what the player is going to be asking? When they're going through this world, do they want to know, the history of some NPC? Maybe in some cases. But right now, what I need when I'm developing this is not so much that nuance, but the bigger pictures of what's going on behind the scenes that the players are going to be wondering about. If this makes sense, I think a big tactic in good storytelling is to leave more questions than you necessarily answer, to show just a slice. Like if you've got the big picture, show only this much of it and make the player think, what's over there? What's over there? And then you can start building on that through various means, whether it be just telling them or showing them. That's one way, but also hinting at it, giving little bits and leaving the player wondering what, and then having to fill in the blanks. And that filling in the blanks in the story will have them create the actual story for themselves rather than you telling them, well, this happened here and this happened here and that's why this happened. So now the player can fill in a lot of the stories. And I think that's helpful from, the developer side, because then you don't necessarily have to answer all the questions, but you can start adding layers that hint at more than meets the eye in the Transformer sense. That there's layers in this onion peel that you're going to be able to peel off, but you don't necessarily have to tell everyone everything. And that's how I approach it. That answer might seem kind of chaotic. On the flip side, more of the logistics of it, I go for walks. And when I go for walks, I come up with ideas and I think, okay, oh, I've got this thing in my head. Like right now, this happened last week. I need to build a temple of the third. And I'm calling it the Temple of the Third, and I'm not going to tell players what that means, because part of the story is not telling them what this thing is that they're going to see over and over. This third. What is this third? I'm not going to tell them what the third is. They can figure it out for themselves if they start going down this rabbit hole, following these little clues of, wait, what's this third? I want to go over here, but there's this. Is there something over here that is, wait, no, there's nothing there. And that's where I'm approaching my story from, where there's story, there's straight up, hey, I need to solve this quest. I need you to do this. I need this item so I can win this battle with this other thing. That's the story, but there's more to it that I'm not going to talk about publicly with the players while they're playing the game. They can figure it out if they want to. So that's how I'm approaching it. But I'd be very curious how you guys all approach the same topic.
I mean, the other advantage to the way that you describe it there is having broad strokes, and some of the stuff, some of the nitty gritty means you can leave hooks out there for players, and then you can get the whole, fan based speculation and things like that. And that may actually inform something that you may have planned out a certain way, kind of loosely, but when you do reveal it or patch it or whatever, you've now gotten these ideas from fans and things like that, in ways that you may not have thought about. So you're kind of like, outsourcing some concepts and some basic hooks, like whatever the third is. You may just have a general idea of what the third is, and you may just give, a basic story, but then you plan on, releasing something later on, and it's all based on, what the player speculator, some hooks that they may have put together that you didn't realize that you had placed out there. So it can be pretty cool to do broad stroke stuff. I definitely have met people who know every single thing, and to me, it's just exhausting to have to keep all of that in your brain. But also, like, it locks you into this like very strict environment where the player is just like living your story. They're not being able to like necessarily be a part of it. And if you leave it a little bit more broad, then they can actually kind of form their own story. If you know what I'm saying. So the way that you're describing and approaching it sounds really nice to me. I would probably do it in a similar fashion. I have an in game. Here's my inbox. And then whatever links on the way there, that's the main story. Now let me see what kind of hooks I can put here, what kind of kooky stuff I can drop a word here, I can drop, I can have them come over a vista and see something in there. This is like I talk about Dark Souls all the time, like kind of their visual storytelling and just the hinting, and there's a painting on a wall, I come up on top of a thing, I look down to a castle. What is the story that this is telling? I may never ever see it. But I just am so compelled, just from the visual of it, just from experiencing the world. I don't need to be ham-fistedly told, what this game world is or what the story is. I just let me experience it and draw my own conclusions. So yeah, I like broad strokes in general, as a way to do storytelling, for sure. At least it's establish it. Yeah.
So as I've said before, I'm just not a creative person. Like it just doesn't have it. People will disagree with me, but I promise you, I'm not. What I am though is I'm well read on the subject. So when there's something like writing, I have no instinct for it. I have zero instinct for creative writing. But what I do have is access to YouTube and Google. And so what I do is I just find out what other people do. And I've learned that there's a million different ways to approach it, but the most common ones, you could take someone like Yoko Taro, who's very famous for his writing style in games like Nier, and he's got a talk on his approach to writing where he does what he calls backward storytelling. And it effectively means he starts with, what do I want the feeling of a character? What do I want a person to feel experiencing my game? And then he says, what events would evoke those feelings? And then what events would precipitate those happening? And then how do I get you invested in those events happening? And you walk backwards and build a story. That's one approach. I don't like that as much, simply because, just as Saleem was saying, it kind of locks you in. You're like, you've chosen the ending before you get there. I much prefer Stephen King's approach, where he basically says the story writes itself. And that's kind of cheating, but what he means is, in good character written stories, you put characters with certain personalities in a space, and they're going to naturally react the way those characters interact. And if you think about your life and the people you know, take two people you know that have never met, that you know well enough, you could put them in a room and just have them interact, you can kind of imagine how that conversation would go. And so I prefer that approach, where I try to figure out who the characters of my stories are, and then I let the story tell me what happens. And so sometimes you'll be surprised. The story will naturally gravitate to one person killing another, or one person stealing something from somebody, and you'd be like, oh, I didn't think of that happening, but like the characters kind of gave me that by the nature of how they interacted with each other. So I personally prefer to work with that approach, because it just means that I get to enjoy the process more. Because again, so here's the unfortunate truth. Once you start looking into this and you start realizing personal biases, a lot of people realize writing is fun. Writing stories is fun. And so what happens is you start writing all this stuff up front, like this world and all these races and characters and cool stuff and whatever. And it means nothing to anybody. Nobody cares. There's no story there. What you've done is you've built all the presupposing information and whatever. Yeah, but it can get really boring. And this is why I keep telling people, like, if you're giving a pitch to something, nobody cares about your 10-minute spiel about the world and the lore and the characters and the races and the whatever. They care about the experience. What are they going to feel when they're in that story and what they're experiencing? So usually it's a good idea to start there and kind of work your way through either who are the characters or what are the feelings and how do I get there? And the rest of the lore stuff happens later. And that's why the whole storytelling in games like Dark Souls is so, like, you're not getting a book in the minute you open the game, because nobody cares. That's not interesting. But what you can do is, if you know that information yourself, you can pepper it throughout the world and let the story tell itself through the characters and the relationships and the whatever. So, I mean, even if your style is to write everything up front, don't pitch it that way and don't write it into your game that way.
Yeah.
Use the environment to tell the story so that it comes together over time. But if you're like me and you have no natural creative instinct for it, the best thing to do is pick people you know in your life and just imagine they all got teleported to whatever world you're making, and ask yourself, what would that person do if they found themselves having to be a trader in this world that I've just invented? How would that personality live? And then what if we gave them this other person I know, they found themselves ahead of a gang and they're trying to steal from that trader? What would those conversations read like? And then you could have a really fun experiment of just like playing it in your head rather than actually having to laboriously write it out.
Yeah, it's like the individual personalities are like Lego pieces, and you're just like building different things with them in different situations. It's a sweet way to think about it. But yeah, like atmospheric storytelling, it's just great because, you know, they get to experience, you know, the visual greatness, and then their brain just starts, you know, clicking and firing all those things. If they're, you know, muddled down in this 50 paragraph, you know, UI in their face, and then they get to go like interact with the world, they're gonna like forget all of that dense information they just got, because they're going to be attacking something next. The moment to moment doesn't, you know, have anything to do with this deep information that they build, or that they just read. So I definitely am a bigger fan of the atmospheric, you know, although I am, you know, obviously a gigantic Final Fantasy series fan, and they're obviously a more like road kind of, you know, straight up storytelling thing, kind of gone away from it with 15 and stuff, being more open, but they still have a very specific story that they're trying to tell. But even they try to pepper in these hints and things. You know, you look at the series, like you look at FF7, which has become basically an entire series, and you know, while FF7 had a lot of mystery and things like that with their characters and things like subtle things that they did in storytelling about their game, over the years, I think some of the things actually kind of changed, and they produced prequels and things like that just based on fans' desire to know more. Whereas in the original game, it may have just been oh, you saw this thing with Hojo, and he hinted that he's, you know, Sephiroth's father or whatever, I forget the specific details. And then it turns into, hey, we need to do a whole prequel on who Zack is and all these things, because the fans have just like gone crazy with all speculation, things that we just didn't fully explain. So like even that type of game still has hooks, and it turned into like a bigger thing based on how people speculated or thought about these different hints that were left in the game, and they still got to experience just this great game overall. So I definitely like the brushstrokes. I like hooks. I like atmospheric storytelling. It just appeals to me so much more. It feels more about immersion at that point versus going into a digital entertainment thing to read a book. I can read a book on my Kindle if I want to get a digital reading experience.
100%. It's
I
the wrong
can,
medium. If you want to write a book, write a book. Don't write a book in your game.
Yeah.
I will say that my one pet peeve, the thing that like will make me hate a game story or like it pretty easily, is do I believe the villain? Because there's nothing that turns me off the story immediately
Yeah.
than someone who's just evil for ... reasons.
Yeah.
They want the thing to destroy the world to whatever. And I've said this line before, but I think it's very profound as a way of thinking about writing, which is nobody is the villain of their own story. And if you imagine every character in every story, they want something. They either think they're saving the world, or they're getting revenge on the world for mistreating them, or something. Nobody is just evil for the sake of evil. Even if they're doing evil actions, they believe they're doing it for a reason that's justified to them personally. And so if you just at least make your villains feel like they're motivated and justifying their own actions, even if they're not to the rest of the world or the rest of your story, that will immediately elevate your story way more than anything else, because there's nothing more transparent than characters who have no motivation because the writers never wrote them, because you can tell the characters, like, they've no reason to be doing the things they're doing.
Yeah, the list of why am I doing this is just because is the answer, then there's no depth to that character. But like a tragic villain or something, like if you can relate to a villain, if you find yourself just kind of believing some points that they're making, and if you put yourself in the same situation, you might make the same choice. Yeah, like that's a villain with depth, and like it just adds to the story, like you're saying.
I think it's interesting that we all do this in real life, that we don't always know why we are doing things. We'll say, I'm doing whatever it is because of XYZ reason. But if we actually dig down deep, and maybe somebody in our life will tell us, we're like, no, that's not why you're really doing it. You were really doing it for this reason, because of this thing happened to you at some point, and that's why you're really doing this. And that's interesting, because so often in cartoons and Disney movies and James Bond movies, people will tell you, I am doing this for this reason, and that is supposed to be the actual reason. But is that real? Is there more to it? And I think, building on the idea that everyone is the hero of their own story, everyone is unaware of their true motivations as well. And so when you're building a storyline, sometimes it might make sense to not really know why a person is doing something for real, but give them some other motivation that you can tear apart if you have a little extra information from over here or over there. And for a game where a player is supposed to make decisions that matter, it's now builds this really interesting dynamic where if you go to the king of some world and they say, hey, I need this because that other kingdom over there is evil and they're doing all this bad things, what does the other king say? And what would the other king say if they found out that you were about to give this king that item that would, and now you've got this really interesting dynamic where the player can discover not only more about why people are doing the things they're doing, but the decisions they make might feel far more impactful than if you're just solving a quest because somebody said, I'll pay you 50 gold.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, if you want a really good example of that, Yoko Taro, who I mentioned earlier, who created Nier, he also made the Drakengard games. This is not a joke. He says this in his own words. One of the major inspirations for his games was 9/11, because from his perspective at the other side of the world, watching this crazy world-changing event happen between different countries that were not related to him, he could see the news and everybody was talking about their own justified actions in a way that made perfect sense and was very justified in what they were doing. And it was so fascinating from his perspective to stand back and go, what kind of world can we live in where people can be 100% honest and earnest in their beliefs and be fundamentally on the opposing sides? And so a lot of the storytelling he has is around this idea that people can be entirely in belief of what they're doing is right and just, and maybe it isn't. And so in this game in particular, Drakengard, there's a question whether or not you're even the hero of the story. You might not be. From the perspective of a lot of characters, maybe you're just like a monster who's just going around slaughtering hundreds and hundreds of soldiers. Maybe you should question that. Maybe why is it okay for you? Is that because you happen to be the perspective of the story being told? Is it perfectly valid for you to just land in a war zone and start just cutting down all of these people who have their own stories and families and whatever? So it makes stories just so much more interesting.
If you haven't played Drakengard, you should play it. I thought I might be the only person who had ever heard of Drakengard. So that's a good game drop right there. Should definitely check it out. It's an old game, but I think it probably stands
Although
up.
Drakengard 3 is better, though, if we're being fair.
And of course, if you haven't played Nier, you should play Nier. There's no
Yeah, I
reason
think we
not.
talked quite a bit about that one a couple episodes ago.
Speaking of
Definitely.
which,
And even though I ranted on a couple episodes and it sounded like I didn't like it, I mean, I did literally just get the second ending this weekend, and I'm going for the third ending later. Like, I'm not, just because I had issues with it doesn't mean I don't like the game. I've got more than 28 hours or something in it, so
I'm sure.
I can criticize something and still enjoy playing it.
But speaking of which, yeah, Mass Effect. Have you?
I picked it up this weekend. I've started playing my through again for the first
All
time.
right, awesome,
as of
awesome.
Friday.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I'm probably gonna jump on it after this, if not later today.
I will say though, and this is again because I played as a kid. Well, not a kid, but I was kind of in college, early college, and now I come back to it with the kind of fresh eyes.
Mhm.
And again, it's so funny the things I pick up on now that were good or bad. For example, we talked about exposition dumps, and some of the opening dialogue in that game is absolutely atrocious.
Yeah,
They
yeah, yeah.
basically have the characters tell you every motivation in
Yes.
this large spiel, and it's like, this is so bad. This is not how you do this introduction. And I know the world's interesting. It gets really, really interesting with so many interesting facets. But the way they're telling me this story is just. And then if you want the extra dialogue, it drops you these like notes in your codex.
Yeah.
You go to the codex and it's like, here is an essay about this race. I'm like, I've not even met that race yet. Why am I reading a book about who they are? That means nothing to me. And the thing is, I'm reading it and I'm going, I know who a Salarian is. I've played the game and I've seen one sing and dance. It's really interesting. But reading this blurb tells me nothing.
It makes that less exciting.
Yeah.
That removes the mystery too when it's like too detailed. You just want to experience that. Yeah.
Cool. What do you guys want to jump on to tips now? We've been doing. Oh, Saleem didn't know about this, so this is perfect to ambush him with it. So for the last couple weeks, I think it's been the last 2 or 3, we've just been doing a little segment, just showing a tip or 2 each, just any random game dev related tips. Last time we had a lot of shortcut ones. This time I have 2 really, really terrible ones. And I expect Saleem to have a great one by the time I finish or something, and just have like a giant list of amazing game dev tips or game design tips or something. But if you guys are all ready to kick it off with that, I've got some, like I said, 2 that are not amazing, but were things that I've been thinking about this week and did videos about, and we could get going on it. Everybody good? Yeah.
I'll just well, just I guess is one thing just to close that off, because it was an interesting topic. Just if anyone's interested on the whole concept of storytelling, one thing I recommend you check out is there's a movie on Netflix called I'm Thinking of Ending Things. It's a Charlie Kaufman movie, and it's an amazing counterpoint to this idea of on the nose storytelling. It's one of those movies that you'll watch, and I'll be honest, if you get it the first time, you deserve a medal. It's a very confounding and complicated story. But if you watch it a second time, or if you just go online and find resources that help you figure it out, you'll suddenly realize how much information really is there that you might have missed, because the storytelling is just so dense and it's told in a way that's very obtuse. But I'm not saying that that's a good or bad thing. It's entirely up to you to decide that. But my point is, it shows that there are ways of telling a story that are far more interesting. Whether or not you like that style is different. But it's like, it made me really think about writing and what that means in a very different way, because it's fascinating. It's a really interesting movie.
Okay, I've got the right one up here, right?
Yep, that's the one. Yeah.
All right, it's on my list to watch it this week.
You won't.
Like I said, you'll get. It'll be very confusing. Like, if you get the story, I'll be amazed. It's like I watched it and went, I felt something. I felt like I feel really uncomfortable, and there's emotions, and I just can't articulate what they are until I watched it a second time, and then I watched some YouTube stuff, and I was like, I get it. The story was there, and I felt it. I just didn't know what it was. I couldn't explain it until it started to kind of click together. It's great.
Cool. Maybe I'll watch it tonight. Sounds interesting.
But yeah, tips and tricks. All right, just derailed on
No,
that.
no, no. That was good. It's interesting. I got something added to my Netflix queue tonight for when my wife asks me what we're watching too, and it looks girly enough that she'll be interested for a few minutes.
John Malkovich. It's from the same guy. It's got
Yeah.
that bent of a storytelling, and that movie was fantastic in its own right.
For my wife, as long as there's not like rockets and things blowing up in the trailer, it's a lot easier to convince her. The second she sees like a robot or an explosion or something, like it's pretty hard to get her to watch the thing. So this might be possible. Cool. So yeah, on to tips of the week, and I guess we'll just go through. Yeah, I'll jump in first since I kind of started with the ambush. And I was just going to show two things that are actually from stuff that I've talked about a little bit earlier this week. And the first was just on using tools to get the job done. So I did a video earlier this week about this Replica Studios tool. I'm just showing it right now. Everybody should be able to see it on screen. And just
I saw that. I saw the video you did, and I immediately was like, "What is that? I have to check it out. It looks really cool."
Yeah, it's freaking awesome. Like, it's just a really cool tool to auto-generate voices. So you can make voiceovers for your characters and put them in the game. Obviously, like, there are people that aren't going to want to use it because it's not going to be perfect for their characters, not going to sound perfect for their stuff. But for, I would say, probably 95, 99% of the people watching, like, it's relatively useful because you can go in, either use it as your final voiceovers or even as placeholder voiceovers, fill the whole thing out, and then have a voice actor come in if you want later, and then modify them or redo the ones that you don't like that you want to change. But it adds a lot to the game when you drop in things like this, a little bit of voiceover and stuff, and it's free for 30 minutes of credit. It's weird because it says free for 30 minutes. That's a lot of freaking credit. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they're watching this, but I'm amazed because it is a lot. That's why they do so much. But when you actually add it up, that's a lot of storytelling because most of the things that I export are like 5 seconds. It's like they're saying a sentence or 2 sentences. So you get a ton of stuff for free, and their prices were really cheap. So I just really liked it. Again, not sponsored by them or anything. I just thought it was a really cool tool, and I wanted to just show it again and make sure that everybody kind of knows that it's out there. And there are other tools like this out there. There are ones that do this for I guess non-Western voices. There were lots of comments about that. Some tools that already exist for that, and then just other tools to make game dev stuff easier. I would highly recommend that whatever it is that you're trying to do and that you want to do, just do a little bit of searching and see what tooling's out there. Because this is a relatively new thing. You didn't used to be able to do this, and I don't know how long it's been around, but I assume that just about any problem you run into, somebody is working on a tool that they will make available that you should definitely search for and check out. So that was kind of the first thing I wanted to talk about. The other one was about getting jobs. So people have asked a lot just about applying for jobs and where to get them or how to get them. Let me close this window because it's just flashing. Sorry. Yeah, that replica window is just flashing in my face over and over.
We don't want you to have a seizure, my friend.
Yeah, and people ask about like portfolios and applying for jobs and stuff. And one of the things I've realized that people don't notice and don't do a lot is actually just go to company sites and apply for the jobs there. Like going to actually look at the companies that are working on games that they might be interested in or games that are using the stuff that they actually use and have some proficiency in, and just looking at their job openings. Because you can go to the big public sites where they just aggregate and people submit all of their jobs. But that's what everybody's doing. Everybody's going onto those sites, and there are lots of other jobs out there that just never make it to that point where they post it internally. They get a whole bunch of people interviewing or applying, or at least a couple of people interviewing and applying, and then that's enough. They don't have to go through the process of extending it out there, or the ones that are extended out there just kind of are old and outdated. I'd recommend just for everybody to go take a look at if there's a game that you like to play that you want really, especially if there's one you really want to work on that you really love and want to work on. Go just freaking apply there. Go try to get a job at that company. Go to their website and look at their positions. Or if you're not, on a specific one and you're working in Unity, go look at games made with Unity and go to their specific sites and start applying on there. So I just wanted to share that because I think that a lot of people just don't know where else to look for jobs, and they don't even think to look directly on the sites.
Related to that too is you'd be surprised how many devs get hired from a modding community. In fact, if you find out a lot of, and it's funny you mention it because we're talking earlier today. One of the people working at Terraria, they're starting their career was working in mods and working their way up. So effectively, it works from the perspective of, because if you think about it, if you are hiring somebody and they've made mods for your game, they've demonstrated they both understand the game, they like the game, and also on a completely separate note, that they understand at least the engine well enough to use some of the tools, which means that's free training. You know they're passionate about the topic because they're spending their free time doing it. That's a great way to start. Now, again, they may not reach out to you specifically, but if you combine that with Jason's advice, where you just say, make some mods, put them up there, then hit them up for a job, point to your mods, you're like, suddenly it's like you're a particularly good candidate. You know, they'll at least take a second look more than they would before.
Oh yeah, it makes you like a perfect candidate, especially for an entry position like that. You're just it's kind of a no-brainer to go with the person who's actually got the experience with it, who understands the context of your game. Like when you talk about a weapon in your game, they know it's a gun, not a sword or whatever it is, you know, and they understand how the system works, how the how the game plays, and everything's kind of tied together. So it's a huge, huge difference, I think. Or at the very least, they should be playing the game. That's another thing. I guess let's make this a third tip. If you're applying for a job at a game company, play the fucking game. Understand the game, know how to talk about it, know how it works. Play it for more than 10 minutes. Don't just look at the web page and look at an example of it. Like, play through the game, spend a day. If you're into it and you really want the job, spend a week or two like going through and playing it relatively hardcore so that you get good at it and that you understand all of the intricacies of it. Because the more you can talk about the game during the interview process, the better it's going to go. The more you understand about it, the more people are going to say, okay, this person's really interested. I don't have to train them about the stuff. They're into it. Like, do it. I know Saleem does that. I assume every developer that gets hired does it, but I don't know. If you don't, do it.
No, people don't. So few people do that. Like, it's one of those things that blows my mind. And this goes for any job, no matter what you're hiring. If you're about to go in for the interview, if you didn't look at their website before you went in, you're insane. Like, one of the easiest things to do is just Google the company, just find out the basics. And specifically for games, like what Jason was describing, this gets into like really kind of niche tips here. But if you play a game and you play enough of it that you understand the mechanics, when you're being interviewed, you can casually ask the question when it kind of calms down a bit and say, oh, by the way, what do you guys work on the game? And if they mention something that you've played or done, and you can say, oh, I love the bit where they whatever, and they go, oh yeah, I did that, you're done. They'll remember you immediately. You're like, you can comment on and interact with them about their own day job, and they'll find that and they'll remember that. Like, that's a game changer of a tip, you know?
It's actually a good way to cheat through an interview too. You can fill an interview talking about their product, and basically it asks no questions. It is, and you know, you're not necessarily doing an injustice. If you got your foot in the door, that means your resume or portfolio was good enough that they were interested in you. So it's not like you're pulling the wool over their eyes. But if you aren't like a good interviewer, and you need to flip something to be casual or comfortable, and you want to turn into a conversation, understanding the product or products, you know, plenty of studios I worked at have multiple games, and I would, you know, interact with all of those games. I get interviewed by multiple teams. Being able to speak to that stuff literally turns interview into a conversation, and it's at that point just a culture fit, because you're basically in the door. If they're not trying to double down and like ask questions or get back on to a very specific interview question, and they want to talk about the game, then you've probably won. Like, you got the high score. So like, it is a great point, but it is also seemingly common sense to the point where I don't understand why you would ever give it as a tip, because it is something that people should just do anyway. Even now, I will say this: you keep saying if it's a job or a game you really want to work on. If you're just getting into the industry and you're just looking for an opportunity, even if it is a game that you may not necessarily be like, you know, super into or whatever, but you want a job in the industry, you should obviously research it, get your foot in the door, you know, maybe expose yourself to a new game that you like, but you should still play the hell out of the game. Watch videos on it. If it's like an MMO where there's like an end game, you can't get to it in time, watch videos and that stuff. Listen to what other people are saying about it. You know, go to some fan sites and see, you know, find out what the meta is for the game, if it's like a systems type thing. But do those things, and then once you get your foot in the door, like, put everything you can into whatever task that it is, because you are a low-level person. This is assuming that, you know, thinking about from a student standpoint, you're a low-level person, kick ass at it. Even if it's something that you're not necessarily interested in, you will find some interest in doing. ultimately that can turn into a bigger career and get you into that place that you might want to eventually be. So regardless of whether you really love the game or not, if you're just looking for a job opportunity, you should still, the advice should be the same across the board. Play the damn game. Play the game. Experience the product. Understand the company. Just like anything. Watch video. I mean, the internet makes it so easy. Watch videos, do whatever. Obviously, when, you know, younger days, there wasn't the internet or the accessibility that there was today. You had to go purchase products, your physical products, you had to put it into your console or install on your computer and play it that way and maybe get some insights from someone. Now it's just available all over the place. So there's really no excuse. And I have interviewed
and if you want
people.
like a layer on top of that, for if you want to get into like really deep social engineering stuff here, one of the things that it's a very common statement, but it is true. Everyone's favorite word is their own name. Like everyone naturally perks up and you know, it's like, oh, they're talking about me. Now, the same thing goes for anything about a person. So when it comes to what they did or they worked on, nobody enjoys more than gushing and talking about the thing they spent their time doing. So if you want to like really double and triple down on this, if you did your research and know the game and you're sitting in a room and one of the person there worked on it and they did something, if you could say, oh, I remember this bit. I was just curious, why did you do it that way? You've just given them, you've opened the door for them to just spend the next 10 minutes gushing about whatever it was they did and the decisions they made and why they made it, which shows the subtext of the conversation you just had is, I like your work. I'm curious. I'm an interesting person. I'm someone who's going to be talkative and fun to deal with. And the person will end that interview feeling positive because they got to just talk about something they enjoy. So they will leave that remembering you as being, because people tend to remember conversations they talk more in, as weird as that sounds. So they'll remember that and they'll be happier as a result. So yeah, you could really just lean into that if you ask them questions about their own career, as weird as that sounds. But like, that's like really doubling down.
I actually had a guy, I interviewed a guy. This is just a funny, quick story. I interviewed a guy, like we had this whole process where, you know, people interview for an hour or whatever, come in. I was thinking I was the third group. And the guy was smart enough to ask about the people coming in and like what their interests are. And one of them told him that you got to show that higher, so we need to see the title. One of them told him that I was in the comic books, right? So the guy had just finished playing Spider-Man. And so at some point, he tried to deflect like a difficult question by bringing up how awesome Spider-Man was, and so we got in this thing where we're like, okay, well, if you took away the city, like if you had to like do Spider-Man in like Wisconsin or something, like what kind of mechanics would you do? And it turned like he completely realized that moment, like I tried to play this whole like Marvel like comic card with this guy, and he turned it into this like challenging question. And it was like a real, like his results were like really strange, but I give him credit for trying to be creative. But then he actually started arguing with me about the history of Spider-Man. And I was just like, what are you doing, dude? Like, this is a video game interview. Like, I don't know what you like, you know, long story short, I did not vote to hire that guy. But I give the guy credit because he actually was like, hey, I got to find out about the people coming in. He just asked the wrong question. Just ask about the product, not about my hobby. I mean, I'm not a Spider-Man expert, but there are certainly some things where you just like, come on, man. Those are really weird. But his concepts for Wisconsin or rural Spider-Man was, they were very interesting. When you take away skyscrapers and stuff like that, and you can't web sling, what can you do? That was basically the question. And he tried really hard, really hard. It was pretty funny.
In a slight tangent, unrelated note, because I said this in the previous one of these Sunday things, that is almost in essence the difference from the minute-to-minute gameplay of why I think Nier Automata is a much better and more refined game than Nier. Because in Nier, you're running across empty fields, and Nier Automata, you're running over interesting buildings. So just that little difference is because the core minute-to-minute loop is better. So that precise thing highlights that you need your mechanics to play into your loop, into a point where it's fun.
All of this is really just telling folks on a very high level, make it easy to say yes to you. All of this is just, if the interviewer comes out being like, that's obviously the person I want, then you're going to get the job.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, when it comes to those interviews too, I was going to say that one of the things I like to do as well as research the company, the product, and all that is just also research the people. So kind of like what happened to you, Saleem. I'll research like what they like to do. Not a lot, but I'll just like look at like their LinkedIn and Facebook stuff, see what
Yeah.
their hobbies are. If they happen to like all they do is post shit about like going on boats or surfing or
Yeah.
skiing or whatever, then I'll know at least there's something like maybe there's something where I can have a fallback thing we can talk about if we're not able to connect, right? If the conversation's not going anywhere, not able to talk about things, I can always like kind of, sneak one of these topics in there that they're really passionate about and kind of lighten them up and then go back into it.
The way you do it's very important, because if you've done your homework and you know that a particular person likes, I don't know, a certain TV show or something, if you just drop that as a thing, it's people don't like to be researched. That seems
Oh,
like
that
a
would be creepy. Yeah. Wear a shirt.
Yeah.
What you do, and this is just in general, if any person interviewing you ever like perks up at something, that's your free pass.
Yep.
So what you do is, if you've done your homework and you know 3 or 4 different topics, drop them in conversation. Like, say that what do you do in your hobbies? Oh, I watch TV shows, and just name 3 or 4 of them. And if they say, oh, I love that show, you're done. Now you're in, because they brought it up as a thing they like, and that's your thing. So make sure whatever you're talking about, you're trying to get buy-in from the person who's interviewing you, because something that people miss is it's a weird situation on both sides. Like, a lot of people don't realize that an interviewer is often sitting there going, I don't know what to ask this guy. Like, if you don't do interviews on a regular basis and you haven't done it professionally, a lot of people are normally coming from a tech field trying to like interview somebody, and they've never been trained in the social aspects of doing interviews. So they're just there going, I'm just gonna like hope they know their D and just kind of ask them questions. And so if you can just bring the mood of the room down a bit and just chat with people and make it relaxing, to them, they're like, oh, thank God, this is an easier interview than the last one where the guy sat there stoically sitting there straight in their chair and just answered questions.
Just yes or no to everything, waving, not saying anything until you ask them.
Yeah, it's just horrible. So just like, if you make it relaxing,
This is great advice for going on a first date too.
Don't research. Don't tell them about their kids' names or anything like that before you've asked. Yeah, that seems like a.
Yeah. No, but do research them before you go on the date. I was.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Your husband doesn't show up.
Hey, your thing, the VO thing. Have you seen the MetaHumans thing for Unreal?
Yes.
That thing is insane, man. I can't like. I don't know how I missed. I think they announced that in February or something, and I just saw all the articles for it like last month. That thing is freaking nuts. I can't imagine someone making something like that for Unity or anything like that, but it'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah, it looks really cool. I'm excited to play with it, but I haven't really dug into it too much. I saw that Cinti Studios has their own like low poly version of that. You guys see that? Sent out an email about it. They're doing like basically like a block character version of it to make characters. It's really cool because like a lot of people want to make those kinds of characters.
That's a brilliant business strategy right there.
I thought so. I was like, that's freaking awesome.
It is kind of tricky when you're making like Mii's on Nintendo, how close you can make them look like you. It's goofy with just basic shapes. So, I mean, I guess there's a market for that type of stuff. If you just had like a Mii creator, I can just make my. Actually, I think they don't. Can't you do that? I don't remember. I made a Mii forever.
I'm wondering how long until we can use MetaHuman on Unity. Like, if there's going to be restrictions against using that in Unity, can I, get somebody to make it in Unreal and somehow port it over to Unity?
I would assume so.
Stop that. Like, at the end of the day, it's going to end up as a model format. I mean, how do you stop people messing with that stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I imagine it's going to end up being usable on Unity at some point, probably this year. I'd say that thing. It's just super amazing. Like when you look at tools that have been released that like have some like significant point, in just the evolution of game design tools. Like that's one of them. I'm just like, holy crap, this is insane. Like just like this VO thing, that's also like a significant tool. That's just in the case of the VO, it's kind of under the radar because I hadn't even thought about searching for something like that.
I'm gonna pull up this Polygon character.
I will say though,
design.
the counterpoint hot take for me is that while I'm endlessly impressed by the fact that we've seemed to have hit that inflection point where we can use machine learning and stuff to do whatever, to the point where almost every tool is going to get automated. Like, have you seen some of the auto replace tools in After Effects and in Photoshop? It's gotten to the point that it's literally magic. Like, it's kind of crazy what it can do. So that's really impressive, and it's democratized tooling in a way that lets any person build stuff that gets more and more AAA.
Mm-hmm.
But I still don't care too much, purely from the basis of I just don't think aiming for more fidelity is really an interesting direction. I think games as an industry has been, if there's an area that games need to improve, to me, it's storytelling. I think as a general rule, people think it is a nice bonus when a game has a good story, but it's not expected. And to me, that's appalling. Like, the thing that I remember most from games is two things. It's the music and the story. And they're the two things that are often least put effort into. I think we've gotten to the point we have pretty damn shiny trees as it is. In fact, like 3 games ago with Tomb Raider, it was pretty impressive. Now, I just don't care anymore. Like, I don't think adding more and more fidelity to stuff is going to be what makes games better. I think it's just going to act as more of a scapegoat. You're going to get more indie studios using more AAA tools to make shinier looking games, but they're still going to skimp out on the fundamentals of even things like level design and not hiring designers and stuff. So
yeah, I mean, the reason that storytelling, seemingly, at least in my opinion, is less of a thing now is because back then you had to, you know, with text muds and stuff like that, you had to be super creative in getting people to visualize what you're trying to say. Even when you're talking about, you know, 8-bit visual stuff like that, you still have to kind of tell the story and explain what it is that they're seeing. And now you can just, I mean, there is definitely a point. Visual fidelity now is just insane enough that I don't know how you get any better. I'm not any more impressed with ray tracing and also their crazy stuff, and because it's still like, what is the game about? So I don't need to tell as much of a story. I don't need to be as descriptive. I don't have to care so much about what I'm saying, because you're supposed to be like super in awe of the visuals here and what you're able to do. So that's why storytelling, you know, like you're saying, it's kind of a bonus now instead of actually being what the game is about, and everything else just makes it look pretty. Now it's just, you know, the coat of paint on the outside, and the interior of the car just isn't as good, which is very, very unfortunate. You know, moment to moment in games has been, you know, pretty predictable. It can be fun, but I can find another game that's, you know, equally fun somewhere. So now it's just about what goodies you're going to give me, who's streaming it. Like, it's pretty kooky. Industry is really kooky right now when it comes to that type of stuff. And storytelling definitely takes a backseat. But, you know, there's been a, you know, a resurgence of the storybook games and stuff like that. It seems like more people are investing in that. I'm not sure if it's just easier from an indie point to do that type of stuff. But it seems like there's some call for more story-focused games. It's just unfortunate those games have to basically be just that as a thing, versus infusing the two experiences together, as, you know, something like Dark Souls or Bloodborne and stuff do very, very, very well. But, you know, that's just a passion for them. They've found a perfect mix of things, and they just keep kind of copy pasting and iterating on that type of stuff. But
yeah, I mean, I get why it's happening. It's the classic arms race problem. It's Unity set the precedent of being the shiniest one, and so Unreal did. So Unity has to match them with fidelity, and then Unreal then has to up their game, and then Unity does the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's just all of these game engines are racing to be the next shiniest thing, and so it just happens to be where the industry's gone. In the same way that mobile phones used to be about innovation. It used to be making the more interesting, cool phone.
Yeah.
And now it's all about which number is higher, which phone has the slightly better processor or slightly better thing, to the point, or the camera. The camera is a big one. Right now, mobile phones are all about cameras. Everyone wants 120x optical zoom and all these other crazy features that are just like, phones are being sold on the merit or whether or not they have 3 or 4 or 5 different sensors in their camera, or in the phone instead of the camera. And so it's an indication of, yeah, there you go. It's an indication of where an industry has gotten, and it just, That's what always bothers me, is because it's driven now by the expectation. I'm still rocking an older phone with just the
I
one.
Oh, you've
just-
only got one camera, Jason.
Only one camera. Yeah.
I don't know if you can still be on here. Sorry.
I just updated just because I had to, because my phone battery died. But I hate upgrading my phone at this point. Because yeah, like you say, 120x optical zoom to the average person. Like, well, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, your current phone has 80x. Oh, so that's better. All right, cool. I gotta get it. Another 60. But how can you
Especially
use
when
your
people
camera?
don't realize too that, like, if you look into this, a lot of people don't realize the phone is switching sensors automatically from zoom. So you'll actually get worse photos if you don't understand when the phone does this, because you'll start zooming in and you'll switch to digital zoom and then back to optical and then back to, and so it's actually become more of a weird scenario for people who are learning to use their phones. So I don't know. I don't turn this into a phone thing. I just wanted to say that you can tell where the mindset of an industry is by what they're optimizing and focusing on. And very clearly, there's an arms race for graphical fidelity that's just been the thing for as long as I can remember. And it just shows why Nintendo really killed it with the Wii, is because they just eschewed the entire standards of where everyone was going and said, you know what, let's aim for fun instead. Let's do that as a thing that we're going to focus on.
Innovation. Yep. And they're still that way. They are still about a solid released products, at least first party stuff, and innovating and experimenting with different things. It's why I love the company so much.
And it's one of those things too. People think you're saying, "Oh, I hate graphics. I hate all about graphics stuff." It's like, no, it's so good now that, like, it's not hating it to just say, no. I think having ray traced, real time reflections, lighting, and stuff is enough. I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm saying that, like, we've hit a point where you could get to the point where you're like having 18 bounce reflections of your lights, or maybe you can hire more writers. One or the other. Yeah.
If you are able to like scrutinize something that much that it's ruining your gameplay experience, that you don't have ray tracing and you're playing, Spider-Man. Is Spider-Man a good game? Yeah, it is. Is it a good game with or without ray tracing? Absolutely. It is a great game, great experience. Like, do I need that?
And if you take away the graphics fidelity, what are you really left with in that game?
Yeah.
Like, I was really hyped for that, like everyone else, and I gave it a try. I did finish it. Like, I'm not one of those people who think it was bad. I think I paid 60 or whatever, and I got my 12 hours or 14 hours out of it. I think that's a fine experience for what I got.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at it and I go, they spent so much time branding themselves as being the shiny visual fidelity thing, that the fact that, like, core mechanics, like the way police interact with you, are just not there is so jarring that it's like nobody really sat and played the game. It's like they were too busy hitting the graphical fidelity, and it just like, and it's not a bad game. It's just, compared to where it should have been for what it was aiming for, it sold itself as a role-playing game, and there's not much role to play. Like, you can't have a game which talks about role play, starts with 4 different or 3 different character openings, and then goes to 1 before the first 30 minutes of the game, and tell me it matters, because it clearly doesn't. It's an interesting cutscene, and then the game starts. And it's so disappointing that you compare that to, even a game like Fallout, where you at least have some checkboxes that will change how your dialogue options act later. You don't even have that, and that's very disappointing to me.
Yeah, and I mean, you see why people opine for games like San Andreas or Vice City, stuff like that. You can go back to those old games and they have more depth, and obviously at the time visually they were, good. But you can play those games nowadays without any remastering like that and get like that same, exhilarating experience from it. Or even a game like Infamous, original Infamous. I think I've said it before. If you haven't played the game and you like an open world game with like good twist story, the kind of standard good evil, renegade, paragon path type stuff, you should play it, because you don't see the twist at the end. You don't see about the bill. Like, it's all done super well. And there's no game like nowadays that's doing similar stuff in the way that they present their story and things like that. That gets you so immersed and into the character and what's going on with Cole in the background. So like it is unfortunate. There's a point visually where I just don't care. Like, if a bunch of boxes are moving around but I'm having fun, then there you go. I'm having fun. You look at Minecraft. I don't need a ray traced Minecraft. I'm fine with normal Minecraft because it's the same experience. And that experience is fun.
You don't need ray traced Minecraft, Saleem?
I
To make
don't.
the game better?
I don't. Although those
Nobody
lights
plays that
behind
game
you
because
look
the
like ray
graphics are so low.
No,
You gotta upgrade
I
it
need
so
a
people will play it.
I need a ray traced Terraria, right? Like, what do I need that for? Wait, is there a ray traced Terraria? Please tell me there's not. Is there like
You have to make it if
a
not.
remastered Terraria, PS5 exclusive? No, I don't need that.
I definitely appreciate really good graphics, but it's true that for me, graphics will get me into something, and then I'll realize the game's not fun. And
Yeah.
graphics without a story is just a tech demo in the end. So
Yeah.
you know,
Good way to put it.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm so, what really disappoints me the more I spend time in learning this stuff is people get into games because they enjoy playing games. And then as you start to play more, you start to ask yourself why you enjoy games. Like, what is it about them that you enjoy? And the more you study this, you realize that, like, it's the invisible hand of tons of creators that made a game memorable compared to other ones. And you realize that the things that make it memorable tend to be the attention to detail in storytelling, in sound design, in level design, in how a game delivers itself to you. And then you get a lot of people who try to make games and then don't take the time to learn the very things that gave them the impression to get into the games industry in the first place. And so there's just so much interesting stuff to learn about storytelling and about level design and about all of this stuff that I think is far more interesting. That, like, it just really disappoints me when I see so much emphasis spent on graphics. Like,
Yeah.
there was that great quote. I forgot. I wish I could remember. Let's see if I can pull it up.
You're on the clock.
Pulling up
Yeah.
quote, timer's ticking.
No pressure. No pressure. No pressure.
I hate
And-
Hemingway. It was a Hemingway quote, right? So there was an argument. It was, have you heard of the term 6-word story?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the idea that you try to tell a story in as few words as possible. And someone was arguing, I forgot who he was arguing with, that said that a story, you need all this depth and stuff to tell a story. And he said, no, I can tell you a really deep story in under 7 words. And the story, he said, was for sale, baby shoes, never worn. And that is just a great story. Like, that's just 6 words. And it's like, everybody can just expand that into for sale, baby shoes, never worn. It's like, what? There's so much in that. And that really highlights to me how the art of storytelling is just really deep and interesting. And you can, how much is there to learn in just that to make your game better? And then how much is there to learn in designing the levels to make your game better? And then in the lighting to make your game better? And then all of these different things. And it's like, compare that to people just spending more time getting more graphics. It's like, games could be so much better if you treated it with the same level of interest as other fields treat theirs, you know?
And that goes to, the thing we were talking about earlier where you like leave hooks there. The never worn is like a hook where it's just like, whoa, wait, why? Like that makes you ask the question. I don't need anything else from there. Now my imagination is just going crazy with all kinds of different results from that. Yeah, that's really cool. Now I'm thinking about.
Yeah. Well, that what's neat about that is exactly Saleem, what we were talking about earlier, that now I think a lot of people go to one direction about, oh, what happened to the baby, but maybe somebody stole the shoes and they're just trying to make some money off some shoes that they stole from a store. And what happens in the person's brain, the player's brain, as they're filling in those blanks and learning more and finding, oh, no, it's that direction, not this direction. That's the excitement. That's what makes our brains like activate and want to know more, want to play just a little bit longer to find out what's the next bit of information I'm going to get. And that sort of mental feedback loop is going to keep people playing longer and get them excited to talk about with their friends, to make blog posts about, and all the good stuff.
And my brain is the best ray tracing of all. I mean, my imagination can just see things better than anything else. So, like, just thinking about that note, now that story's in my brain, and then I'm just going through it. I don't need to see it on the TV screen or anything like that. And I definitely don't need to pay $600-700 at a premium because I can't find the console to experience something, and then pay $70 more for something that is relatively shallow. from a story and experience standpoint of view. And I'm obviously not vilifying or saying that all games are that way, but our market has so many products, and a lot of those products are rushed out. A lot of those, I mean, if you look at Outriders as an example, as unfortunate as that is, because the premise and concept of that game is super exciting, and then just the launch happens, and it's just like, whoa, what possibly did this? Did they need more people optimizing in that sense? Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, so we're just in this situation where it's highly competitive and everyone wants to release the next big thing. Next thing is a copy of this or the other. People try to get creative, and it just isn't the same quality level or same excitement about a release that I've had in the past as a longtime game player and developer. I mean, it's funny. I was playing Rise with a buddy of mine yesterday, and I just mentioned Borderlands, and we were talking about Borderlands movie and stuff like that. And he's like, "We gotta play all of them. We're playing all of them. We gotta start now. Let's figure it out because I want to play through all of them." We just started looking at Borderlands 1 and the Borderlands Enhanced Edition, which is a remaster of it. I'm like, I can just play it without that. But let's play through it. And it just makes me think about, like, Borderlands is an open world RPG. The first one didn't have a whole lot of bells and whistles. It was just kind of a first of its kind. Visually, it's different, cell shading, and all.
Even then, Dr. Zed, I mean, I still remember that character from the
Yeah,
very first game
yeah.
as being this amazing, ridiculous, like, dodgy doctor,
It's all personality. It's just filled with it. It's just steeped in it. And then you have Borderlands 2 and Tiny Tina and Handsome Jack, one of the greatest video game villains ever made. And that comes from writing and personality and the VO, and the different situations the game puts you in. And obviously Borderlands 2 had a bunch of quality of life changes that I guess a remaster for 1 has that made the game experience even better. Visually, Borderlands is not some, high fidelity, crazy, hyper realistic game. It's a cell shaded, cool, stylized game. So I don't need it to be like super high end. I love the experience. I could go and play it, infinitely. In Borderlands 3, same thing. Although I'm not the hugest fan of Borderlands 3 versus 2 or 1, but still, as a game, Borderlands 3 stands above a lot of other shooter looter games. So yeah, I mean, storytelling and just character and the ability to immerse you in it, it means so much more. And then you wrap it up in a package that looks decent, and plays well. That's a big thing. Is the moment to moment feel good? Does it play well? Does it serve the overall game point? If you nail that, then I think you're fine. It doesn't have to be super high end, super high def characters, and then there's just nothing on the back end. It doesn't have to be that. If you can do both of those, it's sure, like you are a master of your craft for sure. You and your team. But yeah, I don't know. And we also talk about Hollow Knight, of course, which is also another example of
that has come up quite a few times. Yeah,
it just is fantastic experience, fantastic game made by 3 people who were super passionate about their product, super stylized. Doesn't need to be high def or anything because the experience is great. If you're a Metroidvania style game fan, if you're an RPG fan, play it, have fun, enjoy it. You won't regret it.
I want to jump in real quick with a counterpoint that I saw this week because a friend of mine, they're from kind of outside the game industry, just on this on the whole graphics thing. A good friend of mine has always been like a sports game player. Plays other games, but mostly sports games on consoles, right? Primarily basketball, some football and stuff. He very recently he played a ridiculous amount of like NBA 2K. I mean, like more than a person should. Right? He probably plays NBA 2K as much as you play the other games combined. He just only plays 1 or 2. But he'd given up on it. He'd gotten kind of burnt out and quit. And then just last week, he calls me up to tell me that apparently they released some version of it now with the PS5 that you get with the other one that has these improved graphics. It looks dramatically better. The animations are so much better. He's like, it's like I'm playing on TV, like watching the game again. And now he's right back into it. Like just instantly, like went from dead to no, this is the best game again. I'm back into it with the new version. because the graphics have ramped up. And I feel like for him, if the graphics had stayed about the same and hadn't gone up near around the levels that they had, he may not have kind of stuck with it. Maybe he would have, but I think that the progression of the graphics has been keeping him and probably a large number of people that are kind of like him around, where they keep seeing it getting better and better, because the gameplay is not really changing too much, because I mean, basketball is basketball, right? You can add to it to make it better, but the general rules of the game are staying the same. So the graphics are like one of the few areas that they're actually able to improve it. And I was kind of surprised by that, to be honest, because I'm a big fan of like, forget about the graphics, like work on the gameplay stuff first, and then then make it pretty after. But for him, it was that total opposite experience. And coming from somebody who's not in the game industry at all, it was just kind of an interesting perspective to see for me.
It makes sense based on just you making the statement, the obvious statement of it's a basketball game. NBA 2K20, 2K21, there's a subtle difference in gameplay, but it's still basketball. So how do you one up that? You obviously add features and stuff for online play. You know, they're really into the paid tournaments now, stuff like that. So they have to refine their mechanics and all the under the hood stuff. But when you want to get an average person who maybe is not interested in that type of stuff, who just wants to play basketball, if it's the same thing as last year, they'll just play last year. And since stuff's online, they can update rosters and stuff like that. You can make your own. So then how do you make that better? You visually is obviously how you do that. So in that sense, yeah, it makes sense, because it's basically the same game every year. You're basically remastering it to be,
right.
To simplify.
I think with that one, you really don't have the opportunity to change. Go ahead.
Then I'd argue that's less about the graphics being the reason he came back, and more the fact that the game was stagnant and needed some change, and that this was a change that was interesting enough to warrant it, is probably more what's happening there. In the same way that like the Driver games have done multiple variants, and there's like Driver San Francisco, which has like different experience of gameplay than other ones. I don't think it has to be graphics. I just think certain genres like racing games and driving games, they lend themselves to a loop that's identical. And so it's very easy for soccer games, especially, you just like cycle the same things over and over again, because they're just, and it can kind of feel like for the fans of those games that the studios don't care. And so I don't think it's that the graphics per se were the factor. It's that the fact that they put in better graphics is an indication the studio cares, and that means the game is kind of worth maintaining attention, you know?
Well, it was that there was an improvement, right? It was a new version that was better. It didn't have to be a whole lot better, but it had to be better. And the thing that was noticeably better for him was just the visual parts that they were calling out and probably highlighting. I think you're right. That just in any game, moving the progress forward enough, especially with something like that where you're just constantly releasing, and you can't really change the game. I feel like a lot of FPS games suffer from that too, because they just like have this core FPS and they're just trying to compete on the graphics part. They're like, well, we're not really going to change we're going to go with, this game and a little bit of this, but then we're going to focus on the graphics to set us aside. That seems like a tough one to win. I don't know. At least for me, I hate doing graphic stuff though.
And your example though, the NBA 2K21 is actually more goofy, because I think he's talking about the difference between the PS4 release this year and the PS5 release this year, which was drastic.
No, this was the PS5 version. There's another version on the PS5. Apparently, you can play the PS5, the one that's like for the PS5, and it had the PS4 stuff. And then they have another version where I guess you're not playing with PS4 players. You're only playing with PS5 players.
So it's the PS5 specific one, and then there's the PS5 that's a port of the PS4 one, basically.
Yeah. I think that's
a really confusing thing, that they let you play PS4 games on the PS5. You can actually buy the wrong one and end up getting the badly upscaled versions of games rather than the new ones. It's very confusing.
It's very, very very interesting. They got a lot of flack for that type of stuff too. For
the PS5 it's very much a business decision of just doing it for the sake of it. It doesn't feel like it's been thought out.
Yeah, there's a standard edition of it for the PS5 and a next gen edition for the PS5. I think they released the one that was just a port first, and then released the other one as a second. It's like a free upgrade that you get though.
I thought you had to buy if you already owned the PS4 one. I thought you still had to buy the second product.
Yeah, you buy the PS5 one, and I think that was mostly just like an upgrade to the PS5. It was the same version, just the PS5 version. And then they later on did a release where you get the upgrade to the upgraded, the ones that actually uses, it's called the next gen one. And you get that as a free download, it looks like. Yeah, you just grab it in the PlayStation store and get the new stuff. All right, did anybody else have any tips before we start wrapping things up?
We just went through a whole bunch.
I know. I just want to make sure that if anybody had anything else that they wanted to share, they got a chance.
You're not getting me.
I guess the one tip, it's slightly just to kind of tie in the previous thing we talked about. So we just gave kind of a big general consensus that we prefer story stuff-ish as a feature more so than graphics as a general rule. And one thing that it can kind of feel like is a bit scary that we've basically just said, here, go and learn to be a writer to make your game. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you have to learn a million complicated things. And for a good example of this is take the game Slime Rancher. So there's a really great story. I think it's a JDC talk where they talk about how players engage with the game and the stories that they build in their own heads. So an example of this is they've got slimes of different creatures, and one of them is a Nico slime. And it's basically a cat. It's a cat slime. And it's got unique behavior in that it's the only one which picks up food but doesn't eat it. So it just holds it in its mouth. It's not a particularly deep game mechanic, but it's different. It's a different thing that it does. But here's the thing. You've now got an animal that can pick up food and just wander about. And so it has the side effect of stealing food. It picks up food, moves around, and then drops the food. And what's interesting is players who play the game will start to superimpose their own beliefs as to what's happening. If they happen to be running around their game world and they walk over and they see a cat slime, see a bunch of other slimes eating food, take a piece of food and head in the other direction, they'll say, that cat just stole that food. That's hilarious. But if they're instead seeing a bunch of slimes sitting together and a cat with food in its mouth comes over and drops the food, they're like, oh, that slime's feeding his friends. And so when we're talking about storytelling here in this particular case, I don't mean you have to write a book or a big giant narrative. I'm saying that players will make stories from what game they're playing and how they're engaging with it. And it doesn't all have to be literal dialogue or writing deep lore. It can just be engaging with the fact that players are going to experience a world, and minute to minute, what world are they experiencing? Like, how much depth is in there? And so that interests me far more. Like, you don't have to be a master of writing, but like, just do some research into the various ways that players engage with systemic stuff and how narrative is working and how the geometry of your world affects people's perceptions of space and how color theory can affect the way people's moods apply in certain rooms. Just learn these basic things bit by bit, and you end up really enjoying the art of making more engaging games and stories. It's not about being a writer or being an artist or being a whatever. Yep. It's about learning how these other disciplines can affect in a nice way with kind of minimal knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. And it definitely goes back to, the whole Neverwarn. It's a hook, right? Is he dropping food for his friends? Is he stealing food? Yeah, like it's a point of view, and yeah. It's been a good talk this week. I like it. It's unfortunate you guys wouldn't let me come, the past 3 weeks.
You haven't made your YouTube channel yet. Like this comment recommends, you got to get on it. You and Jason.
I don't even know what. I mean, I thumbs up doing this, so I mean, I'm probably not.
It's okay. Here's what you gotta do. It's just every time at the beginning of it, you gotta say like, hey, we're gonna talk about something really awesome that you're gonna love a lot, but first you gotta hit the thumbs up button and subscribe and hit the alerts. And if you have questions about it, drop a comment. Actually, if you have any thoughts at all, or you're just here, drop a comment down below.
Seems like you do this a lot.
Just do that over and over and over. Right? As long as you remember to do that. Good. Hey, R2D2 wants you to hit thumbs up. This thing's really cool, by the way. Fabian showed me this R2D2 dice thing. It's a little dice Yahtzee game that comes in an R2D2 can with these cool little Star Wars dice. Like $4 on eBay.
Like I don't have any figures or anything. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just a neat little dice game that I got. I mostly just got it to use the dice as counters for playing Magic, but I thought it was kind of a cool little decoration too.
I have a Razor mouse. That's about it. All my
Razor mouse.
All my stuff is packed. Sorry.
Oh. Yeah, getting ready for the new studio. Oh, we got a super chat for you real quick, Saleem.
What's that?
Thoughts on Returnal?
I do not have a
or PS5. Resident Evil.
I don't have a PS5, so I haven't been able to check out Returnal. Resident Evil Village, I am excited about, but I have not had a chance to check it out. Like I said, I'm ME right now, still playing Rise, playing FF11 here and there, and then Biomutant comes out the 24th, I think, and I've been waiting for that for a long, long time. So I haven't had a chance to. I don't have a PS5. I probably won't have a PS5 for a while. I don't feel like going through the rigmarole of sitting and waiting.
Yeah, it's all a pain to get.
Yeah. Returnal looks interesting though, so I am curious to check it out once I'm able to procure a PS5, which are now saying there will be limited stock into next year.
I saw that.
True story. I think it was on Thursday or Friday. I got a message because I'm subscribed on 4 Twitter accounts, which are Irish PS5s. People are just tracking them when they come in. And one of them was somewhere 10 minutes up the road. I got the message. It was in Argus. And I said, you know what? I called the phone. It's busy line. It's going to be busy. So I just called the taxi right then and there, went down. And in the 15 minutes it took me to get down there, that sold out. So I tried. That's the one time I've even remotely tried to put any effort into this.
Yeah,
and now
yeah.
I'm giving up. I'm done. Like it's ridiculous how we're like 6 months in and I'm still having trouble giving money to somebody. So I'm out. That's it. I'm just not trying.
Whether it's a video card or a PS5, people just like they either don't want your money, they want way too much. You know, it's not. I don't need that right now. I'm good. There's plenty of other games on the other platforms, existing platforms that are fun and worth engaging with. That I can wait.
Yeah, I'll have to jump in some Monster Hunter with you. I actually grabbed it on the Switch so we could play, and I never hit you up after that. I played for like an hour or two, and then totally forgot about it and forgot I was playing it and that I was going to play with you. So yeah, we should do that sometime.
Yeah,
Cool
anytime.
stuff.
I'm usually always awake. Yeah.
And then get a PS5 eventually, whenever they show up.
Probably, I'm guessing I'll have a PS5 probably next June, maybe.
You'll have to put it in the new studio, the recording studio, when you start the YouTube channel in Texas. Oh yeah.
As long as
call it Saleem in Texas would be the channel name.
I don't need a PS5 until Ratchet and Clank comes out. Then I need a PS5, so I can wait.
Oh yeah, wait, is that PS5 exclusive?
Yeah, as far as I know, isn't it?
Oh man, I haven't looked into it. Oh, God, don't tell me that. I was hoping I wouldn't have to buy one. Now I guess I do.
Well, after this, we've got Andrew's going to be premiering a new video. I'll let him talk about that in just a second. I also just wanted to say, everybody go hit the like button, subscribe, and alerts. Check out the links. I got a course down below and a whole bunch of other stuff. Everybody's links down there. Jason's link, Andrew's, and Saleem's YouTube channel will be down there whenever he makes it. Which way are you? You're that way. Whenever Saleem makes his channel, it'll be down there too.
As we've said before, Jason, nobody's left comments about the fact that we should make a YouTube channel, so we don't know that we should. Nobody's told us that they would engage with that idea. So,
oh, that's a fair point. Afterwards, if you're watching this, leave a comment down below to make sure that Saleem and Jason knows. Funny thing is, like when people leave comments saying that Saleem needs to make a channel or where's Saleem, I screenshot those and send them to Saleem. I just literally I'll screenshot and I'll just text it right over to him. Like not all the time because there's too many of them, but when they do appear, I just send them over to him.
I haven't gotten any of those.
Yes, you have. I'm gonna send you more. Anyway, I wanted to give Andrew a chance to just introduce the video that he's going to be premiering that's linked down below and have everybody, while you're in here still, click on that link, go queue it up, hit the thumbs up button, and just be ready for it to help Andrew out and go see what he's got to show. So we want to tell everybody what it is real quick?
Yeah. So earlier this week, I got the mega bundle from the Asset Store, and there was some stuff in there that I'm almost certainly going to use in the game I'm working on. And I realized, hey, I should just make a video about what's in the bundle, because I realized this bundle it's like level design stuff, and it's a lot of tools, not so much art this time, just a lot of tools, and they do some interesting things. So it's a video, it's not too long, premieres in a few minutes, and it goes through each of the stuff in the mega bundle. I talk about why I will or won't be using it in the game, about 30 seconds to a minute per asset. And what I like about them. And there's some really great content in the bundle that, honestly, if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's probably something of value for everybody in there. So,
yeah, definitely go watch that. I'm gonna watch it too. I got it pulled up right here. I can pull it up and just go through. Let me hit the thumbs up button. And do I have the little alert? Oh, yeah, I got my bell on there. Just wanted to make sure that that thing was checked too. Bell is on, subscribed, and ready to go. So I'm going to wait for that, I guess, to kick off in 2 minutes and see what other stuff is in there. You guys have anything else you wanted to say before we wrap this up?
I'm looking forward to next week's segment on syntactic sugar from Jason Story.
Yeah, yes, with bullet trees, syntactic.
Yeah, and a really nice intro video, a little, maybe even a jingle.
Oh,
You have to do like a cool fly-in over some bullet trees, syntactic sugar, something like that. You have to,
Use the robot voices to have dialogue about my syntactic sugar.
oh yeah. And then we can get a metahuman version of you to speak, and we just tie it all together.
It's really coming together now. Yeah.
Oh man. All right, everybody, go ahead and click over. Only 23 of you so far are in there. So everybody click over to that one right now. And I guess we'll just wrap this up. And I just want to say thanks again, everybody, for coming out here and watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click on all the stuff down below. And we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. I'm going to hit the weird button now.